What was the incident at your workplace? When I was 17, I worked the egg grill at a big university cafeteria. The grease, oil, and residue from cooking thousands of eggs each weekend would fall into a channel and drain into a removable metal trap about as long as my leg. Each night we'd remove the trap, dump it, and put it back again. Sometimes we'd rinse it too. Anyway, as a new employee, I was overly eager to please everyone. I cleaned the trap with scalding hot water and tried to get it as clean as possible. That's when I noticed the trap felt heavier than it ought to be. It was only partially filling up because at least 2/3 of it was filled with some sort of, blockage. So I started banging the trap. Hard. I kept flushing the top third with hot water and slamming the trap against the inside of a big garbage pail. Nothing was happening. I keep doing this over and over because little tiny pieces of congealed egg, and God knows what else, were breaking loose. Finally, I slam it once more, really hard, this time against the floor. Whatever was blocking the trap broke free and this horrendous, frickin' grey and black sludge comes pouring out all over the kitchen. Words cannot possibly fricking describe it. The smell was like a living, breathing thing. A rancid mixture of purified egg, bacon grease, rotting flesh, and whatever the hell else was in there. It radiated instantly and irreversibly outward, slamming everyone in the kitchen like a punch to the face. So I heaved my guts up first. It wasn't even a question. I don't even think my mind fully realized what had happened. I was just blowing chunks out all over the floor in front of me. I dropped the grease trap and turned to run, and 3 other employees were also throwing up, 2 of them into Rubbermaid pails and 1 of them into the sink where he was washing dishes. People started running for the exits. That's what I remember most. This was at SUNY Stony Brook, on Long Island, and the Kelly cafeteria had about 30+ people working back there at any given time. We all met outside the parking lot, gasping for air, trying to figure out what to do. No one knew what had happened down there except for me, and they only knew something horrible had happened. When I told them I'd just cleaned the grease trap, they all looked at me horrified. "Nobody cleans that thing, we just dump it," they cried. "We haven't cleaned that thing in frickin' years." Needless to say, I was in charge of the cleanup. It involved a crap ton of bleach, several trips, and a steam hose. I found out a few more people chucked up in the outer areas too, out by the serving lines. One girl threw up into the bowl of salad she was chopping. Anyway, that's my story. Nothing will ever come close to that smell in my entire life, and from that I derive a little bit of comfort. As absolutely vile as all of this is, I freaking love the idea of cleaning out an entire venue with one act of slightly overzealous diligence at your job. And your old boss can thank their lucky stars that this seems to have happened in a time when your local health inspector was less diligent than the teens flipping the food. This reminds me of my old boss's story of starting work at a locally well-known restaurant. He had taken the head chef opening as he was working on getting the funds to open his own restaurant and needed something to tide him over. First day, everything goes without trouble. Then at the end of the night, they start cleaning down the kitchen. He grabs a screwdriver and goes to dismantle the meat slicer so the blade can be cleaned, and someone tells him not to bother. Don't bother to clean the meat slicer? For real? He ignores them, starts taking the blade off, and everyone takes a step back before a putrid cloud of stank starts emanating from the 2 or more years' worth of rotten meat and cheese that had gotten stuck there. During his time there, the cleanliness standards were raised massively by him. But after he'd left and opened his restaurant, we had a chef join us from the other place, and he reported it to have gone to crap again since the boss left. Used to work in a cinema, there was a drunk guy being pretty loud and aggressive. There was a big guy sat in front of him who got a little annoyed. That big guy dragged him out of the screening. I think him and his wife left afterwards and demanded a refund. I work at a boarding kennel, and one day one of the dogs got out. It rarely happens, but it does happen occasionally. We all chased this dog for about an hour until they sent me back to the kennel in case someone showed up there while they were trying to capture it. I go back and I see about 30 minutes later that there's a traffic jam on the highway and there's a camera showing 3 people chasing a dog there. It was something straight out of the cartoons. All that was missing was the yakety sax music. Last week, someone accidentally sent an email intended for like 4 people to 8,800 people, pretty much the entire building. This triggered tons of people replying saying, "This isn't for me, take me off this email," which then evolved into tons of people emailing, "Quit replying all, everyone," which then turned into people sending memes making fun of the entire ordeal. In about an hour, I received 216 emails. 216 emails to 8,800 people is something like 1.9 million emails, not including actual work emails outside of this. All of this our email server had to process in an hour. A guy named Greg was one of the first to respond to the email explosion, and he had this little picture icon thing of a Jeep in his email signature, which consequently was on nearly every email from then on. It was after the first 150 emails or so, people were getting pretty agitated and still screaming to stop replying to all, when some brave soul replied all, commenting by saying, "Sweet Jeep, Greg." It was the fricking funniest email of all, and I completely lost it at my desk. To anyone who works at Chrysler Tech Center, sweet Jeep, Greg. One of the vending machines in work malfunctioned and set all of the prices to 0. People formed an orderly queue to loot the F out of it, and it was empty in less than 15 minutes. I work at a hotel, and my boss wasn't letting anyone talk about the fact that our graveyard clerk was fired for being caught on camera with a working girl in my boss's office. He's telling everyone he quit for another job. At a vet's office after closing, 2 male techs decided to take cushions off a couch, hold them out in front of their bodies, and then run at each other full force. Now, one is an average 180-pound man, the other is just under 400 pounds. The little guy goes flying and splits his forehead open on the wall corner. Now we have a work injury that needs to be reported unless he wants to foot the bill for obviously needed sutures. I don't remember what they decided or if they made up a story for workers' comp. We don't speak of it. There had been a few, but the one that sticks in my mind was when the HR department had crap rained upon them. There had been warning signs. The toilets on our floor took longer and longer to drain, but nobody thought about mentioning this to the facilities crew. Some kind of blockage had occurred in our plumbing system, however we were unaware of the consequences this would have. I didn't see it all, but apparently it started with the smell of number 2, then a brown drip, drip, drip from the ceiling. Shortly followed by a torrent which ran along the office, coating 5 PCs and 2 people in their colleagues' crap. I turned up to see another member of HR holding a massive bin while a steady stream of light brown liquid poured out of the ceiling and filled it up. I gave them a wave and just went upstairs to our office. I was talking to one of HR about this event, as it's legendary, and she said, "I'll never forget that. It was my first day." Warehouse here, a guy in a hurry decided he'd climb 3 pallets high to grab a case instead of bringing the pallet down with a forklift. Well, he slipped and bounced on the concrete floor. Now, whenever someone does something unsafe, we call it bouncing. Where's Bob? Oh, he's in the overflow aisle bouncing around. The guy survived, but he's on permanent disability. Oh, I'll just make a list. The one time our manager punched a pregnant woman. The time our manager was arrested for tackling a guest. The time our manager was accused of lighting property of a foe on fire. And the 4 times our married manager slept with a much younger employee. Take note, these were all different managers. I don't know whether to be relieved that this wasn't the same guy, because on the one hand, if you do any of these things, obviously you need to go. But on the other hand, the negligence of someone who'd let a staff member do all of these things would be epic, even for the restaurant industry. I work for Autoliv, a major manufacturer of automobile safety devices, primarily airbags. We have a lot of on-site recycling facilities and processes, one of which takes the fired igniters out of used airbags to be recycled for parts, but first has to be cooked in a giant furnace to set off any remaining unfired explosives. We also do this for competitors to help them save money and to make us money. Long story short, we received some igniters we don't normally see or process. They ended up going off while being carried to the oven, setting off a chain reaction and blowing a hole in the side of the building. Only one guy was injured with minor burns and temporary hearing loss. I was working down the hill in another building about a quarter mile away, and it sounded like a jet breaking the sound barrier right overhead, twice in less than a second. The cause was the igniter they were not used to handling being more sensitive. The guy was walking with a tray full, and one went off, boom. I worked at a Dairy Queen in high school, and one day when I wasn't working, the crew decided to initiate a new guy by making him go south of the border on a realistic male member, complete with the stones made of soft serve. They took him into the back, away from the cameras, to do it, but he left a note for the owner to check the cams the next day so he could see them making the ding-dong out of ice cream and taking him to the back. The entire shift, except for the victim, was fired the next day for allowing it to happen. Needless to say, I'm glad I wasn't working that night. I worked at a hospital, and it was pretty much that a group email was sent out to see what people wanted for lunch. It was pretty much the entire floor, but somehow one of the guys replied but had copied in a conversation he was having with a girl he was doing the deed with, which revealed she was potentially pregnant. She worked on the same floor. I was the first one to notice and pointed it out to him. He frantically went from desk to desk asking that they please delete it. This one guy cranking it in the washroom, but not in the toilet stall. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. A while back, I apprenticed at a small furniture workshop for a few months. The total number of employees was 4. The boss/head woodworker, myself, a night shift finishing pro who I'd never met, and the general laborer. The entire workshop was cluttered on a good day and downright treacherous on a bad one, but somehow things got done. One day we were rolling out the fruit of 2 weeks of hard work. A complete kitchen set in rich natural rosewood, kind of a traditional Asian aesthetic kind of thing. Lots of delicate little crossbeams that I'd had to hand sand one by one. We wrap individual segments in moving blankets and had them ready for loading into the company truck. And then disaster strikes. I hear the sounds of argument from inside the workshop, and the general laborer comes rushing out. I only learned the details later, but apparently our boy was good friends with the Colombian dancing dust and got caught snorting a bump right off one of the workbenches. The boss tells him to get his stuff and get out immediately, which sends him into a frothing rage. He grabs a sledgehammer and goes to town on the kitchen pieces, annihilating 2 weeks and several $1,000s worth of work. This is when I learned an important lesson. Never mess with a man's creations, especially if they put bread on his table. The boss threw a heavy spanner in the newly unemployed snowhead's face, knocking him the heck out. That was around the time I realized woodworking might not be for me after all. I only stayed around long enough to finish remaking the kitchen set and for the boss to find a replacement for me. Well, that was that one day one of the network guys was chatting up one of the female ops in the data center. He put his hand out to lean on a post and hit the emergency power cutoff switch. No, we didn't have a cover on it at the time. The data center goes dark. Attempts to turn power back on and fried the UPS. 8 hours later, the UPS was bypassed and we got systems back up and running. I used to work at McDonald's, and one time we had a girl cleaning above the deep frying vats with a cloth. There were lots of oil splashes up into the stainless steel. Anyway, she dropped the cloth into the vat and without thinking reached in and grabbed it. She deep fried her hand and now has permanent scarring and nerve damage. For those wondering, the skin kind of fell off, like when a snake sheds its skin, leaving raw red patches all over her hand. Someone, still unidentified, poisoned a female co-worker's soda with bleach and some still unidentified substance. She survived and is fine, but someone who I work with tried to kill a co-worker. Did she stay at that workplace? Because I really hope that either there were massive changes at that place or that she was moved to from-home work, because it's just crazy. What kind of compensation can you get from your co-worker trying to poison you? And what do you do if you don't know who did it? By golly, working retail, we've got quite a few of them just at our store alone. Some of the short versions are as follows. One of the old supervisors, before I started working there, had a thing for one of the managers. It got to the point where everyone knew and it got extremely weird and creepy. After this going on for a bit and him being rejected once, the manager moved out to another state to work for another one of the stores. This guy followed her to the next state. Followed her, entered her car, shanked her and threw her body in the field and then stole the car. He was caught very shortly after. Another time, there was a guy in the first week I started working there that was just not the sharpest knife in the drawer. He wasn't a bad guy, just a tad sleazy and not bright. So, one day his girlfriend asks him if he wants to go swimming because she was going very shortly. He was not even midway through the shift at this point, and in his mind he begins thinking of what he can do to go home. Instead of just saying he isn't feeling well or finishing the gosh darn shift, he thinks, hey, maybe if I line the bathroom in toilet paper and light it up, I can go home. So that's what he does. He lights the bathroom on fire. The alarm goes off, all the employees and customers are confused at this point and start to leave. Then our almighty Lord and Savior store manager comes and tells everyone it's a freaking drill and it's okay, while the bathroom is on fire, and he just proceeds to turn off the alarm. Well, when the fire and police departments start showing up, he gets torn a new butthole by the fire marshal, and then after a quick look on the cameras, lo and behold, Mr. Poolgoer was termed on the spot. Then there was the sad one. There's not much to it. Again, it was before my time, but an employee was super depressed and wanted to end things, so he decided the best place to go would be the stall in the men's bathroom. He didn't succeed, though, and has now thankfully gotten some help. Then there was the phantom crapper. After store hours, one of our janitors was going through the trash again. They normally clean them once all the customers are gone, and once more before leaving. So this janitor smelled something a little odd. After taking the garbage out of the pail, right at the top are a pair of crappy boxers. He cleans it up and continues cleaning. At the end of the night, when we have our little daily meeting, after myself and the manager are done speaking, the janitor says, "Oh, by the way, one of you left your poopy pants down my garbage pail." We all laugh a bit and he explains that after we closed, someone had crapped themselves, tossed the underwear in, and was running around commando. Nobody ever fessed up. Then came the incident on the most wonderful time of the year. Two of our Christmas associates had a problem with each other outside of work before their hiring. After working together for a bit, the two made this apparent. Snarky remarks here and fiery glares there. One day, the two went on their break together. They got into an argument in the break room, and after getting into it a bit, one of them took out pepper spray and unloaded on the other employee. We found out after she came out screaming. Worked at a big warehouse for an electronics wholesaler. Some kids trespassed and got trapped in a container because the mechanism broke when they shut the door. They were only in it for 5 or 6 hours. They got in around midnight. The first shift workers came in around 6 a.m. But the parents were furious and the management exploded over the kids managing to get past the security guards. The deputy manager exacerbated things by thinking it was funny and joking that the kids nearly got shipped off to Taiwan or something. The parents didn't see the funny side of that. I don't know if the parents ever followed through on threats to sue, but I do know the guards had a lot more rules to follow and empty containers had their locks locked while open, if that makes sense, so the doors couldn't physically shut. Bonus, it later turned out that the mechanism wasn't even broken, the kids just weren't thinking straight and were turning the bolt the wrong way. They could have left at any time. I was controlling at an adult club where people take off their clothes for money. The controller is the person who sits there while you get a dance to make sure nobody's breaking the law. We had the waitress come up and tell us that someone downstairs was looking for a guy who had just booked one of the dances for an hour. I assumed it was one of his mates, so I dismissed it with, "Tell his friend he can hold his own eggplant for an hour." When the waitress goes, "It's his wife. She says they had a flight to be on and she found him when she checked where his credit card had been used." I damn near crapped myself laughing, and we went to get the unfortunate patron. He was crowing, "Oh no, I'm single, I don't have a wife," on, until he walked downstairs and saw her and muttered, "Oh," and walked out with her with his tail between his legs. Kudos to the wife, she was trying so hard not to lose her crap at the staff and the dancer, I'll bet he got fricking slaughtered later. I spent over a year in those clubs and it was the only angry partner incident ever. One office affair got leaked to the media, and the husband of the woman involved accused the man involved of coercing or forcing the wife into doing the deed. I used to work at an armored car company near Boston. We had an inside job one day. It was super frickin' intense until we pieced together what had happened. So here goes. The truck pulls up to the normal stop. The driver's cousin gets on the truck. The truck drives around Lawrence, a crappy town north of Boston, for 45 minutes and stops at its normal stop to pick up more money. The truck then drives to the cousin's house. The cousin makes 2 trips, bringing duffel bags into his house. The truck drives away and finishes another hour of its route. 2 hours later, pulls up to Lawrence Police Station to report robbery that happened 2 hours and 5 miles ago. Said they were robbed by a 6.5-foot Asian man. 2 hours after arrival at the police station, driver and partner are under arrest. Well played, men. One of my mates works at a fish store. Somebody was sacked for punching a catfish. Wait, an aquatic bottom feeder or a date who showed up looking nothing like their picture? And here's another dad joke that 2 commenters set up. Why would someone punch a fish? Because you have to batter catfish before you fry them, silly. Guy gets a DUI one night. In the army, well, in my unit, this means his chain of command all the way up the company goes to see the brigade sergeant major. This isn't really a rare occurrence, but if you get a DUI, you're more or less regarded as a crapbag and you're gonna get kicked out. Fast forward a few months, the guy's separation paperwork is close to done and he should be out soon. We have a training rotation across the country coming up and the commander needs a driver. We don't have enough bodies, so the commander works out a deal to save him from the separation if he'll drive for him in the training exercise. The deal is done. The guy's a fairly seasoned soldier and has combat deployment under him and does really well at the exercise. He even gets an award, and people have changed their mind on him. The weekend after getting back from the training exercise, the guy drives drunk around Post, drifting and drag racing and doing dumb crap in his Mustang. He loses control and drives through a fence and hits a particularly expensive military vehicle. The military police are called and arrive at the scene. They try and arrest him, but he sucker punches one in the jaw, breaking the guy's jaw and his hand. Another MP tackles him and he goes to jail. Same situation as the first paragraph happens again, and on Sunday night he's released from jail and he's told to show up Monday morning. He does not show up on Monday morning. His leadership goes to his barracks room. The place is ransacked. The guy went AWOL. They wait a few days. The guy updates his Facebook with his new location and pictures of him. This goes on for a couple of months. The guy's stepmother drives him from Kentucky to Wyoming, where his father is going to sneak him into Canada. The father is drunk and can't drive and refuses to help at all. Stepmother starts fighting the father. Cops get called to the house, guy goes to hide in the house, cops defuse the domestic situation and take the father into the house. They hear rustling in the attic and the guy falls through the ceiling right in front of the cops. Last I heard, he's doing time at a military jail somewhere. What was it actually like to be on reality TV? How real or fake was it? Several years ago, my cousin went in for a tattoo at the shop from Inked. You know, the one in Vegas. It was an off-filming day, so none of the artists from the show were in. He got his tattoo started, and they asked him to come back in a few weeks when it was healed up to schedule an appointment to finish it. When he showed up, filming for the season was finished. The shop was closed, cleaned out, and the space was for sale. You know, that seems somewhat fraudulent. My dad sued my mum and they both ended up on Judge Joe Brown because Judge Judy said no. My dad is a scumbag. He dodged child support payments for close to 8 years and didn't contact me or my sister during that time, from when I was 5 to 13. When I was 13, he popped back up out of the blue and wanted to visit, but he lived in the Ozarks now and we live in New England. So he flies out for a couple of days and we visit, don't really hit it off, and he goes back home. A few months later, we get a letter from some producers in LA saying my dad called the number for Judge Judy and filed a lawsuit against my mum, demanding she reimburse him for the money he spent to visit us. It says Judge Judy turned it down, but they had a new show yet to air called Judge Joe Brown. They wanted my parents to appear on that. If she said no, there was no legal jeopardy for her. The show is for entertainment. It also said my mum could file a countersuit against my dad. So being really angry, she did, for everything from school tuition, to books, to dentist bills, to my sister's speech therapy, food, school supplies, clothes, and fricking everything for 8 years. It came out to about $150K. Now, the filming date is scheduled and it happens to fall on my first day of school. My mum decides that's too important a day to miss, so I'm cut from the trip. They fly out, get put up for free in a nice hotel, free meals, spend a while in hair and makeup, then start filming. Within 3 minutes, the judge boots my sister from the room, saying that a little girl doesn't need to see her parents fight in public. Good guy. The judge listens to both my dad and my mum. My dad's reason for suing was that my mum lived too far away. The judge asks who decided to move to the Ozarks. The judge calls my dad a moron. Judge listens to my mum list off all of the crap my dad skated on. Judge says if he could, he'd give her every dime she asked for, but the limit is $5K and she's getting all of that. The judge tells my dad he should be ashamed. My mum calls my dad a deadbeat on national television, crossing that off her bucket list. Both she and my sister got a bonus $300 appearance fee and cards from a bunch of people who book extras and backgrounds for soap operas and stuff. Then they spent the next day at Universal Studios, the same day as the MTV Movie Awards, so they all got to watch all the limos arrive and some of the red carpet for that. Then on the flight back, they ran into some soap opera actors from General Hospital, which is my mum's favorite. It was a good trip for her. You know, I always felt like the people on these law shows were just roundly being exploited, but I'm happy to be proven wrong in this one case. Screw you, author's dad. I was on set for a filming of Ghost Hunters in Buffalo. On the show, they're investigating an upper level of the Buffalo Central Terminal when they hear a disembodied voice say, "Get out!" It was the property manager on a lower level yelling at some homeless people to clear out. Everyone knew it was him, but it somehow made it into the show as an unexplained event. When my wife and I were looking to buy a home in Michigan, our agent told us we had the opportunity to be on House Hunters if we wanted to. We talked to some person from the show and they told us the basic process. We'd buy whatever home we wanted, then they'd film us there before we moved in, as though we were just looking at the place, as well as 2 other prospective places that they'd selected. Then we'd ultimately choose the house we'd already bought and live happily ever after. We watched a few episodes, or I did, my wife already liked the show, and I convinced my wife of how stupid they'd probably make us look, so we passed on that. While at a bar in New York City, someone approached my dad and his buddy asking if they wanted to be on a gourmet cooking show. Naturally, they agreed and asked if I, a 14-year-old at the time, could join. The promoter said, of course, gave them the location and told them to tell me not to eat a big lunch, as it would be a large multi-course meal at an upscale restaurant. I skipped lunch that day after a rough lunchtime soccer match and left school early to meet my father and his friend. We arrived in a strange part of Manhattan, near the Hudson, in a rather dead part of the city. We got a call from the producer saying, "Sorry man, wrong location. We're sending a car to pick you up immediately." We hopped into a taxi and boom, "You're on cash cab," the bald-headed host declared as lights flashed above our heads. So, we lost, got kicked out in Chelsea, and ended up spending our own money on food and a taxi home. It was very upsetting. I was on This Morning when I was about 7, and they did a big makeover for me and my siblings. The premise they created was that we were a nightmare and my poor mum just wanted us to look smart for an upcoming christening. The main part I remember was them telling us to jump in the mud and shout no when our mum asked us to stop. Normally, we wouldn't have dared, so I remember that being fun. Oh, and my sister ruined her hair 3 times before going on stage, so they made us hold her hand so she couldn't touch it. I have several friends that were on the first season of Moonshiner on the Discovery Channel. It's totally fake. I mean, they do make moonshine, but what you see on the show is not what it's like in real life. Most of them are licensed to sell alcohol, and do sell it locally at the package stores. The others only make a little to have for themselves and a few friends, more to keep up a family tradition than anything else. But the producers had them set up stills in the woods and even told them what to wear to make it look more like a backwoods, redneck, good old boys thing than anyone in this area has looked in 50 years. Most of us sat there with the guys that were being filmed, watching the episodes and laughing at all the people that probably think this stuff is real, while drinking store-bought beer. The hard stuff is only for rare occasions. It'll rot your gut if you drink it all the time. I worked on Love It or List It. The reactions at the time of the reveal of the house were meant to be real, and they actually signed a contract saying they won't go in the house before renovations are complete. 99% of the work isn't done by the people shown doing the work on TV. It's done by subcontractors. The entire staff works until 1 or 2 a.m. the night before filming to get the house ready. Most of the stuff they put in for design purposes was taken back after the shoot because it wasn't part of the homeowner's budget. We got blacklisted from several stores because we'd buy thousands of dollars of stuff and take it back after we shot. I was on Jerry Springer. The episode never aired, but the entire thing was fake. They even asked me to find friends to complete the storyline of a double love triangle. Coolest part of all of that was when they literally asked me if I wanted a fake doctor's note or a fake death certificate made out in a fake family member's name in order to get me out of work. They literally had a guy on staff whose only job was to get people out of work so they could attend filming. My ex was scheduled to appear on Jerry Springer once. His girlfriend at the time was an exotic dancer, and their show recruiters went to the club she was dancing at to pick up girls for upcoming episodes. She agreed to film and managed to get a deal where my ex would get to appear on the show with her. Behind-the-scenes negotiations involved coming up with a storyline and light scripting. The plot would be that he was appearing on the show to propose to his stripper girlfriend, and she would reveal that she was actually a working girl and would introduce him to her pimp. The showrunners loved it and even agreed to provide an engagement ring for the bit. So he woke up for his morning flight, turned on the TV while he packed, and watched the Twin Towers fall on live TV. September 11th blocked his chance at white trash fame. Well, that was a wild roller coaster of a story. Of course, we all knew that Jerry Springer was more fiction than any given anime, but the story leading up to this guy's cancelled TV appearance is just stranger than any story the writers could have come up with themselves. When I was in university about 7 years ago, we got an email inviting us to take part in 60-Minute Makeover in the UK. It's a show where a person's family calls in a team of experts to totally refurnish their house while they're away from home for the day. The audience at home are led to believe that all of the work is done within 60 minutes, and they make a point to start their countdown on camera and rush everyone in to meet the deadline. About 10 of us joined the makeover team at about 8 a.m. on the day, and were given flat-pack furniture to make outside the house before they started the makeover. The crew had a skip outside where they threw all of this poor, unsuspecting guy's furniture, only to be replaced with all of this cheap stuff that was only available to him via sponsorship of the program. They list all of the new furniture's manufacturers in the credits at the end of the show. They also masked off all of the skirting boards and light switches, ready for painting before we were let loose inside. We were let into the house as a member of the ITV crew declared the start of our 60 minutes. After 30 minutes of frantic, patchy wall painting, carrying lamps, uncomfortable seating and chipboard coffee tables into the house, we were told to vacate. We then had lunch in the street while the experts went in to clean up our mess and then did it all again for another strict 30 minutes. After we were finished and the official 60 minutes were over, there was another period of professionals tidying and filling our crappy decorating before we all gathered outside and waited for a man to come home from work. He'd find that all of his furniture had been smashed into a skip outside the house and replaced with stuff that may look good on camera for a couple of seconds during a quick sequence, but would be very disappointing to live with. This man would be very happy about his makeover, and we'd leave the scene as more experienced, well-rounded students with an insight into TV production. My cousin was involved in filming for The Bachelor, not as a contestant, and said that they film many scenes in several different ways. For example, they might film them cuddling while walking, and then walking while looking annoyed, and so on. Not that fake, but yeah. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. In Holland, there was a Dutch version of Pimp My Ride. A player of a football team we played against had his car pimped, and the car didn't even make it home. He had to call the car repair service on his way back from the studio. My mate was on tattoo fixers. If you don't know what it is, basically they get people with tattoos they regret and make a design they don't tell them about, tattoo it on top and cover up the old one, and surprise them at the end. He filmed the big surprise reveal like 5 times because he wasn't surprised enough. Not me, but my best friend was 16 and pregnant. Now, I don't know if this is always the case, but none of the drama on her episode was fabricated. However, at one point, they did ask her to reenact a conversation that she had with her mother off camera. The funny part is they had her reenact it about a week after giving birth, so she was no longer pregnant. To hide that, she wore a big sweatshirt and held a teddy bear in front of her tummy, so you couldn't tell the difference. My sister's friend's family was on House Hunters several years ago, and everything about it was staged. They'd already decided on the house before the show even started filming, and another 2 options that the couple was considering were found afterwards. They filmed a bunch of fake conversations between the family members to make it seem like they were still making up their mind. The thing is, this was a Latino family and every member struggled heavily with English. The conversation scenes were obviously forced as these people were just stumbling their way through scripted English sequences, and it was obvious that they would have been having conversations in Spanish if they were on their own. The issue was so bad that I'm surprised they even aired the episode. I was on an episode of Wife Swap. One of the wives was a burlesque dancer, so her new husband had to MC a variety show of which she was the headliner. I was the juggler in that act. Full disclosure, I'm pretty sure all tape with me on it is on the cutting room floor. Anyway, it's pretty darn fake. The people are real and a lot of their interactions are real, but a lot of scenarios are staged. Okay, now we're going to plan for the show, but make sure Wally, the new husband, takes over. He had never done anything showbiz before, so naturally we tried to help him, but the director kept telling us that he was in charge and he needed to be doing the planning. I caught a moment of a personal interview as well. Honest answers, but very much being steered by the camera crew and director. During the show, the crew said they needed to get sound levels, so they had people sit quietly, clap politely, clap normally, clap loudly, among others. I'm fairly certain that this was so that they could have clips showing a range of responses. In the end, the whole show bit got about 4 seconds of screen time. Waste of 2 days, no pay for us. What the actual fudge? I mean, I knew that these shows were complete bullcrap, but you'd have thought that they'd actually pay the people who they're literally rounding in to do what sounds like legitimate acting, as in doing stuff as commanded by the director that isn't real. So dumb. I was on a European version of Survivor, where we went to an island and had to survive for 2 weeks. Whatever was seen on camera was what was actually happening. The only fake thing is that we got some food to maintain a somewhat healthy diet. My girlfriend's best mate was on a similar show here in Australia. She said there was a lot of clever editing, obviously, but that the crew fed them plenty of booze and a little bit of food. I actually have 3. A friend of mine was on The Bachelor. This was years ago, and she ended up being one of the last 4 girls. She said they were constantly fed alcohol, were put on a strict sleep schedule where they were literally put to bed and woken up. Also, there were no clocks anywhere, so all the girls were in a constant state of alcohol-fueled disorientation. There were no chance encounters where the guy is just sitting on a couch and the girl goes up to talk to him. All of that is staged. Even their conversations were reshot over and over if the reactions weren't right or if their wording was off. The entire thing was completely controlled, and she said no one really knew the guy because none of their interactions were real. Another friend of mine's house was on House Hunters. He wasn't on the show himself, but his house was the one that was picked. And yes, it was sold and all the paperwork was signed before they filmed. He was there when they filmed all the segments, but wasn't allowed on camera. And my wife was on America's Got Talent. She was a dancer for her friend's act. She said they lived in a tent for 4 days in the parking lot. She had a very positive experience, though. She said she met a lot of cool people and that it did feel genuine for the one episode she was on. Her friend made it through that round but got eliminated the following week. I was on an Australian reality show called Surprise Chef. The premise of the show was that the celebrity chef would meet someone at the supermarket and then cook dinner for them. On my episode, I volunteered at an aquarium. The story in this episode was that the chef met my boss at the supermarket, then cooked all of the aquarium volunteers a nice surprise dinner. Of course, this was all pre-arranged. There was no meeting by chance. We all knew what was happening, so for the scene, we all got surprised in the shark tank. We knew what was happening and did 7 takes of fake surprise. The celebrity chef cooked nothing. He went in for a few takes and an actual chef cooked all of the food, while the celebrity stood outside chain smoking. The food was average, basically local RSL quality, chicken parm and profiteroles. I think I drew the short straw of things you get in a reality show, a crappy meal. Other people get like cars or renovation makeovers. My brother was on X Factor UK. There are several rounds before the televised rounds, so all of those rubbish acts you see on TV have been picked by producers to go through. I've also been in the audience of The Voice and X Factor, and they make you do loads of fake cheering, dancing, and clapping before the show starts, so they can cut it into the actual show. 90% of the cheering you see or hear on televised shows has been added in post-production. My dad was on Comic Book Men, basically the same as pawn shop stars, but for comics set in New Jersey. He didn't want to sell the item, he just wanted to show it off. It was off-the-cuff dialogue with cast live on camera. He did 2 takes, there was no script. They did ask him to come up with a reason to sell the item, which was based on truth. I was on set with him as the background. It was pretty cool to be there, but I had to stay in the same place for an hour and a half rereading the same crappy DC comic. They aren't allowed to show any Marvel stuff unless it's an item someone brings into a store. The crew spends about 15 minutes hiding all of the Marvel items in the store before shooting a segment. I loved the experience though. I was on Stan Lee's Superhumans. Long shoot at the high-altitude chamber I worked at. They brought a guy who had climbed Mount Everest a bunch of times without supplemental oxygen, 29,000 feet, so we brought him to the same altitude in the chamber with some Westerners to compare against. He asked for oxygen after 15 minutes, and after 30, they asked me to pretend to pass out. Looking back at what aired, it's obvious that I was faking, and they edited the show so that he won the competition. It's Season 2 and Spider-Man is the episode title. I worked with this guy who was on a TV show in England. He said the show producers would tell him he'd get more airtime if he was cheating on his partner instead of just being happy with his girlfriend. They just love the drama and don't care what it costs. Yep, that about checks out. At least it sounded like Jerry Springer had the decency to plan the affairs and fake it with the people on the show, so that he wasn't just encouraging people to ruin their real-life relationships as well as their reputations. I was on a TV show in the UK called Bargain Hunt. I went on it for a bit of a drunken dare and never expected to get past the online application form. But after a phone interview and a bargain hunt tryout day, we got on, as in me and my workmate. I asked my workmate as he was going through a crappy time. It was shot over 2 days. On day 1, we had 1 hour to choose the 3 antiques to buy, and day 2 was the auction day, where we sell chosen items. The only fake bit about it was that we had an hour to choose our 3 items, but we actually spread this over 5 hours as we had to film, get sound right, get lighting right, among other things. And as the TV crew was sorting out lighting and stuff, me and my friend would keep on looking around the antique house for other objects to buy. A guy didn't ask me anything about being on Pimp My Ride. Everything done to the car was cosmetic. I believe his car didn't run before the show and didn't run after. Basically, a polished turd. I was on a reality ambulance TV show when I was an EMT. The patients were real and their medical conditions were real. Everything else about the show was fake. When we filmed it was for a bariatric ambulance TV show. In the morning, when the camera crew got there, they filmed us driving lights and sirens around the parking lot. Then we did personal interviews where they let us talk about moving bariatric patients and how we felt about our jobs. Then they made us say a bunch of stuff that we normally would never say, like, "Without us, these patients would die," among others. They used these clips of the stuff they made us say and spliced it into the real-life stuff we said. Our actual ambulance transport scene in the show was 100% planned and scripted. The patient wanted to go to the ER and have some decubitus ulcers looked at. However, this patient, being diabetic, had a high blood sugar of 400, having just eaten and taken insulin. We took that and were forced to treat it like a life-or-death situation, and then they used our earlier footage of saying things were life and death and our driving around the parking lot lights and sirens to make it seem like we were fighting for her life. In reality, in about 30 minutes her sugar was going to go back down to normal and life would be good. The whole experience actually turned me off reality TV and made me realize how fake everything is. I had a cousin on the new Chris Hansen. I wish that was fake. It's not. My cousin was on Hell's Kitchen and said they'd film for over 10 hours a day, then they'd go to sleep around 11 p.m. only to get woken up at 2 a.m. to film again to make them more irritable. The producers would purposely bring up topics to create drama with the chefs. They retaped when they answered the door in the beginning a couple of times to make them seem more surprised. They portrayed my cousin as the classic hot blonde. It was certainly more of a reality TV show than a cooking show. What's the dumbest reason the cops got called to a scene? The reporting party said a pigeon was acting strangely on her deck. It wouldn't fly away. It flew away when I clapped my hands. Also had a call for 2 people riding bikes smiling suspiciously. A lady called because a cat was in her yard. Not attacking anyone or anything like that. It was just in her yard. Even better is that we had to do a report every time we responded to a call, even if no citations were issued. So in my report, I put a cat as the suspect and a calico as its race. I belong to an online neighborhood board. Some woman went off because people walk their dogs and the dogs go number 2 on her lawn. We had all agreed that not cleaning up after your dog is terrible. She clarified and said that, everyone was picking up the number 2, but it was leaving germs on her lawn, so she called the police. Responded to the outside of the county jail one time, the LA County Twin Towers, and had to actually fight a guy trying to climb the fence into the jail. This might not sound like much until you realize that we had to fight a guy in order to prevent him from entering the jail, then drove around the back and put him in jail. LA is fricking weird. I was dispatched to a house in reference to a reported vandalism to a vehicle. When I got there, the guy who called was standing by his car. I saw that there was no visible damage to the vehicle. His complaint was that dust picked up by the wind was coming from his neighbor's yard and landing on his car. The guy actually wanted to file a criminal complaint. My first thought was that maybe I was dreaming this nonsense. All I could do in response was stare at him and say absolutely nothing. The guy became uncomfortable and explained his complaint again. I couldn't help but just stare at him more. At the time, I didn't think I could say anything to him that didn't sound insulting. I think he finally got it since he just went inside his house and never called us again. Well, there we go. So far, the majority of the reasons can be summarized with, the person calling the police was bored and/or lonely. It's sad, but somewhat expected. Let's see if the next story follows that trend. Hint, it does. A few years ago, when I was moving into a house, I was doing most of my moving late at night. The nosy old couple across the street kept calling the cops and reporting suspicious activity. The first time the cops showed up, they were prepared for a criminal. They had their hands on their weapons, flashlights in my eyes, but by the 4th time they just BS'd with me and my family and told the couple to stop calling the cops. I'm not sure what made the couple think burglars would bring stuff into the house instead of taking it out. Once responded to a call originating in the sheriff's department parking lot. Literally walked out of the doors into the following fustercluck. A lady had just been released from the jail and her ex-girlfriend came to pick her up, drunk on a moped. The reason it got reported is that the drunk woman was doing donuts in our parking lot waiting for her ex, lost control and rammed a police car. My training sergeant had always had a saying that ran true to that day. We don't catch the smart ones. Officer here, working 2 years in a large city. The first call that truly made me question my job choice was a disturbance between a husband and wife. Officers had been out of the house earlier in the day and the wife called 911 a second time. The wife called and said she and her husband were arguing because she wanted to do the deed but he refused because her hoo-ha stunk. It was difficult to remain professional. I was an EMT. I was called to a sick person which turned out to be a perfectly fine person that just wanted a medical checkup. And because he thought that all EMTs were doctors, we could just give him one for free since we were already there. Cop here. We have a guy in town who's a paraplegic and confined to a wheelchair. He also has a totally abrasive personality and is an all-round awful person. The county pays for a caretaker, but he either fires them or they quit because they won't cater to his unreasonable demands. He called 911 once because his trash cans didn't get moved to the curb before trash day and he wanted the cops to come do it for him. The dispatcher routed me the call. I called into dispatch and told them that I was absolutely not going out to put this guy's trash out. They ended up sending the fire department after enough cops mutinied and refused to go. Working front desk at a hotel. Customer called 911 on me because I wouldn't give him a free upgrade. My neighbor hated my Mustang. He started calling the cops on me for drag racing. No, I'm accelerating to the speed limit of 45 from a stop sign. Anyway, he started calling the cops on me when it was a pickup truck, the UPS truck, the garbage man coming by. If he heard an engine, it had to be me. I spent a couple of weeks in Germany. One night, my parents got a knock on the door. It was the cops. They had reports of me drag racing again. My parents handed the officers my keys and said, "He's been out of the country for 2 weeks. You can go feel the engine if you want." The police apologized for disrupting my parents' evening. At the apartment tower I worked security for, some Saudi royal family members called the cops because the working girl they hired took their money and ran. The cops said, "Sure, you can have the money back, but you have to admit to misdemeanor solicitation to do so." And before people ask, their cars had KSA, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia license plates, and the Saudi royal family crest on it. Also, they admitted to what they did to the cops, so in order for the cops to take the theft report, they'd have to include the solicitation report. I'd say the cops gave them a break by just letting them all go. Soon-to-be police officer here. When I was doing an internship with the local sheriff's office, I was with one deputy and we got called out on a domestic disturbance. Before we could get there, a city police officer intercepted the call and took it, since it was just outside city limits and we were still 15 minutes away. So we continued to patrol the county when the same people called again, specifically asking for a deputy to come out to the scene. We got there, and right off the bat this woman was going on about how the city police officer was very rude to her and she wanted us to go arrest him and have him fired for unpoliceman-like conduct. That's her exact wording, by the way. I had to turn away to keep from laughing in this woman's face. She was very angry because he allegedly said the F word in front of her daughter. Keep in mind, this woman was using that word 3 or 4 times in each sentence. We pretty much told her that our department doesn't police other departments and that she should contact the chief of police and make a formal complaint. This didn't sit well with her, and she told us that we needed to leave before she called the cops on us. Again, I'm not joking. At this point, the guy I was with couldn't take it anymore and told the woman that he was arresting himself and taking himself downtown, and we left trying not to bust out laughing. If everything goes right, I'll have some more stories once I get hired by the sheriff's office. My grandma was recovering from surgery in the hospital once. She had to share the room with this senile woman. I was really young, but this woman was so memorable. Whenever she needed something, like being hungry, bed raised, whatever, she'd dial out to 911, like multiple times in an hour, because you can call 911 for help, you see? I guess eventually dispatch called the hospital and told the nurses station what was happening, and they had to go in there and talk to her about it. Hilarious, though. Well, it's just nice to have one that was based on a misunderstanding rather than the people being inherently crappy or just desperate for attention. I hope they got the old dear to understand. Oh, so many. A woman found a half-eaten sandwich in her unfenced backyard. She thinks someone threw it in there to poison her dog. She saved the sandwich and wanted us to test it for poison. A man called because his trampoline was blowing away in a windstorm. One woman called because someone stole her American flag from her front yard. One of those little tiny yard flags that are about a foot tall and you plant in your grass. She called the morning after a particularly bad and windy thunderstorm. I had to explain to her that it's much more likely that the flag blew away than someone maliciously stole a 50-cent flag. I then found it in a nearby sewer drain. Also, my dog is acting strange. Can you send a police officer? Happens way more than you'd like to think. My favorite, though, is people who call in because people are driving too fast through the neighborhoods. So we go out there and run radar. 9 times out of 10, the person caught speeding is the one who called in the complaint to begin with. I have a family friend that works 911 dispatch, and her favorite call was when a guy called in because he got his sack caught in his zipper jeans. He thought he was going to die and kept crying on the line. I live in a neighborhood, I drive a black car, and it looks sporty. So I routinely have mums with strollers trying to tell me to slow down. And I'm always going 15 miles an hour under the speed limit. They got to where they'd be waiting for me to come home to just yell at me. They called the cops. The cops sat in the woods for apparently 2 weeks getting my speeds. I didn't know. I couldn't see them. Welp, clocked me under every day going to work and back. They ended up telling the women to leave me alone or they'd arrest them for harassment without me even asking them to do anything. My dad was a dispatcher 30 years ago. Hi, I'm not sure if this is an emergency, but I think my wife is dead. A friend of mine who's a police dispatcher said a woman called the police because her teenager took the rest of the Doritos from the cupboard and wouldn't put them back. So this semester in class, a student had lost the lock for his bike, so he brought it into the classroom and set it against the back wall. This was against the rules because in a 200-person lecture hall, 100 bikes would crowd the room. However, this was a spacious classroom with 20 students. The professor said he didn't mind the bike being there as well. Well, the professor next door did mind. He saw this guy bringing his bike inside and told him it was against the rules. The student said, "Okay," and walked past. Next week, the professor sees the bike again and says, "If you bring that bike in here again, I'm calling the police." The student laughs it off and walks past. Next week during class, there was a knock on the classroom door. 4 police officers had shown up. One had her hand covering her face in embarrassment and said, "We received a call that said there was a bike in here which is against the rules, making this trespassing. The bike needs to leave or else we have to arrest you." The student said he doesn't have a lock and it will get stolen. The professor knocks some sense into this kid and tells him to go home because it's not worth getting arrested over one lecture. In the end, no arrests were made. I don't think there was a fine either. Police officers all had a look, saying, "Why are we here?" and they just seemed super embarrassed. The professor who called the cops probably got the bad end of that deal, though. The professor whose class was interrupted had a lot of clout at the university and didn't take kindly to the whole situation. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. There was a lady that called the cops on a homeless shelter because they wouldn't let her turn the dorm into a sauna. She said she was freezing but refused blankets and wanted to use a fire hazard space heater. The cops came, saw the dorm was over 65 degrees Fahrenheit, and told her it wasn't an emergency and left. Had an elderly frequent caller report trespassing. I showed up and didn't see anyone around but her. She said the mosquitoes were landing on the neighbor's dog droppings. She distressingly explained how the mosquitoes would then fly over the fence onto her property. I heard a 911 call where an old woman called the cops because she couldn't open a jar. The woman actually sent the police to help. I went to a house for suspicious footprints in the snow. The footprints led to the oil tank, so I checked the mailbox with the homeowners and found an oil delivery receipt. Wait, you can call the police and they'll show up because of weird footprints? I got the impression that most people at least concealed the real petty reason for their calls until the officer was actually there. Like the lady who called about the trespassing and only later revealed it was mosquitoes intruding on her property. These old person needs something calls we're seeing so much happen more frequently than you'd think. I was an intern with my local police department for about 4 months. Small town of about 10,000 people. Here's a list of the really dumb ones we got. 1. An old woman couldn't back out of her driveway and asked for an officer to help spot her. 2. A woman couldn't find out how to turn off her dryer and was worried about flooding. 3. An old man's alarm clock went off and he couldn't figure out how to turn it off, and he was physically unable to bend down to unplug it. 4. A 17-year-old girl asked if there was traffic in town. That one really made me mad. And 5. An old woman literally just asked for an officer to come over. Turns out she just wanted someone to talk to. And you know what? For each of these calls, an officer was sent over to assist. A lot of people don't like cops, and sometimes it's deserved. But for the most part, cops are just normal citizens who want to help people. The first time my parents left me home alone at age 7, I called the cops because there was a man with a wrench in our fenced-in backyard. I got really scared and thought he was going to break in and hurt me. Turns out he was just fixing the pool heater. My parents weren't expecting him since he was returning to finish a job he started yesterday, which my parents thought he'd finished. The guy decided hiking the fence was easier than coming to the door and asking to be let in, plus he assumed no adults were home since no cars were there. He was in plain clothes. The cops were very nice about it and didn't yell at me, even though I dragged them out for no reason. My parents, on the other hand, will never let me live down the killer poolman of doom incident. This may be apropos of nothing, but I called the police once because there was a guy wandering the mall parking lot across the street from my houses, screaming the F word as loudly as possible, and seemed to be trying to force his way into the mall. I didn't call 911, just police HQ because it wasn't an emergency. 9 cruisers showed up within 5 minutes. Must have been a slow night. I once called the police because there were hundreds of thousands of maggots covering a huge parking lot, and I was convinced there was a body in the nearby dumpster causing the infestation. I might have been drinking a bunch. I'm an EMT and was just listening to the police channel on the radio one night. We hear, "County to district cars, we just had a female caller state there's a black male wearing a hoodie walking down her street. The unit on the road? Okay, what does she want us to do?" Dispatch said, "No idea." My partner and I laughed for a good half hour over that one. My neighbors have reported the following issues to the police. Lawn clippings on their sidewalk. Apparently my dad, who was in the hospital at the time, blew the clippings onto their side. Not having a fence around an above-ground pool and being worried that their 18-year-old kid is going to drown. The yard has a fence around it, but the pool doesn't have any barriers. It complies with local bylaws, though. Also, our dog barking overnight. We don't have a fricking dog, but they do. Our car being parked in our driveway, and they didn't have enough room to erect a non-compliant fence. Their fence partially falling over because it was installed incorrectly. Having a fire in a legal fire pit, and being worried it was going to burn their house down, which is more than 40 feet away. And having our camper parked in the driveway and not being able to see out their window. The only thing they can see out of that window is the outside wall of our house and one tree. I have dumb fricking neighbors. This isn't even the total list, just what I can remember off the top of my head. My dad in the early 80s was medicated as all hell and called the cops to report that his neighbor stole his green herb. LEO dispatcher here. A lady called into 911 to report her baby back ribs stole right off their grill, while another called in to report that a plane was flying low. Do I look like the Federal Air Association or Shane's Ribs? We dispatched and aired lookouts on both. Deputies called into the radio practically crying at 3 a.m. They were laughing so hard when I confirmed the unit for larceny, she wants her baby back ribs over our radio. Worked for the local newspaper and we got to read all of the calls to the cops. The most hilarious one was a woman who called in to report a man driving around in his van, playing loud music and luring kids. When the cops showed up, it was the fudging ice cream man. I wish I was making this up. Some people are just nosy busybodies. Well, to be fair, that's an excellent cover for someone engaging in that particular crime. I think out of all the stupid crap we've been reading, that it at least bears checking out if people use the words luring kids. I got pulled over a year ago for speeding, 10 miles per hour over the legal speed limit, and not 1 or 2 or 3, but 4 cop cars showed up to the, quote, scene. It was in my super suburban hometown, and I'm a 5'1" female, driving a non-tinted window, smaller SUV. I think I can speak for 3 of the cops who were called that it was pretty freaking dumb. Once a lady called us claiming that her neighbor was threatening her. As it turned out, she claimed that her neighbor was plotting an attack against America. How did she figure this out? She had been going up onto his property and looking into her Middle Eastern neighbor's windows and noticed that he had a prayer rug in the middle of the room and said that he worked odd hours. She was given a stern warning about trespassing onto her neighbor's property and told to stop being such a racist idiot. I liked a Facebook page where all calls to police for incidences are posted for the county. The center of my hometown is the crossroads of 2 major state highways, and they've slowly been expanding them. Traffic is super congested in town, and I repeatedly see posts like, "Officer called to intersection of 34 and 47 because light is taking too long to change," or "Officers called to intersection of 34 and 47 because lights have changed but cars remain stopped." Really, people? This construction has been going on for years, but you're still confused? Saw a woman threatening to call the police on the staff of a kebab place in my city because other people, who had ordered before her, were served before her. She then started screaming about how her husband was a lawyer, blah blah, she'll sue, discrimination. She was escorted out by the off-duty cops who were in the place and was seen making a pathetic, groveling apology. Spoiled rich witches, male and female, waste of life and a waste of a good kebab. By the way, on the discrimination thing, this lady was white, drunk, and an idiot. About 12 years ago, I was driving home from a friend's house and I saw an injured raccoon in the middle of the road. It had likely been hit by a car and was unable to move, but it was intact and stood a chance of survival if cared for properly. In a benevolent gesture that was out of character for myself at the time, I called 411 to find out the number for animal control and was told that after midnight, the police took over for animal control. So I called the police and told them there was a hurt raccoon that needed medical attention. In a voice dripping with sarcasm, the dispatcher told me, "Okay, I'll send out an officer to look at the hurt raccoon." I got the message and took it on myself to wrap the raccoon in a shirt and move it onto the grass. It didn't struggle or try to bite. It understood I was trying to help it. In all likelihood, it died on the lawn later that evening, but at least it didn't get run over. That night, I had a dream where a human-sized raccoon fed me amber liquid. I don't recall having ever tasted scotch before, but I instinctively recognized that was what it was that I was drinking. The next day, I bought a bottle of scotch and it was the same flavor from my dream. The bottle was empty by the end of the weekend and I wasn't sober again for years. I was living under a bridge by the end of it. It took me everything to overcome the crushing grip of alcoholism, but I finally got my crap together. This April makes 7 years I've been sober. A woman called 911 at 5 a.m. to report her son wouldn't get up to wash the dishes. She went to jail. Misuse of 911 is a crime in my jurisdiction. One's child not doing the dishes is not a valid use of 911 services. Backstory: we live in a 3-family home and our landlord had agreed to rent the upstairs apartment to a couple moving from out of state without meeting them. After getting a good reference about them from the man who was hiring one of them to work for him. They were white trash, loud at all hours, severely underweight, with a filthy dog, smoked in the house, they were told not to do this, and even jimmied the washing machine open to steal quarters. The landlord didn't collect these, the washing machine was just on our neighbor's grid, and they were used to reimburse them for the utilities that were used. We shared a common entryway with these garbage people, and my boyfriend left his jacket out there. In the morning, the last few cigarettes from his pack and $2 were missing. He called the landlord to let them know. At this point, our landlord was desperate to get them out and was trying to build a case. So our landlord called the police. An officer had to come over and take a report. We felt kind of silly. In short, our landlord called the cops over $2 and a few cigarettes. What did your monster of a neighbor do? My monster neighbors? Well, I moved onto a dirt road with several houses on it. My friend has lived down the road his whole life. The people next to my house only came up for the summer and are never there for the winter. When summer comes, however, there's multiple potholes on the road. Curious, I asked my friend. He said the neighbors come up in the summer and dig the holes themselves in order to slow down traffic. So, yeah, that. My neighbor had 2 access roads to his property. He didn't live there, he just had livestock there, and he insisted on using the one that cut through our property despite the fact that it was actually the longer road, and it was a literal unpaved road through the woods. He didn't have an easement or anything, he just assumed that since he had to drive through our property to get to that crappy lane, he was allowed to do so. He was also a total jerk to us for no reason. He never said hi, he got upset if we were too close to his property, despite the fact that he literally drove through ours every day. Revenge came when lightning struck a tree in our woods and it fell right across the access to the lane road, on our property. He hired a service to chop the tree up and told them that they could have the wood as part of the payment. It was some very nice walnut. My dad wasn't having any of that. He walked down with a copy of the sale documents, pointed out the marker that clearly separated our land from our jerk neighbor's land, and got the neighbor to admit that the tree in question was both from our land and currently laying on our land, not the neighbor's. And then my dad sent the crew packing and told them if they took so much as a branch from that tree, it was theft, and he, a lawyer, would see them in court for it. It's been over 15 years and that tree is still laying across the access to the lane road. He can still access his property via the other road, so he didn't have a leg to stand on to force an easement. Screw you, Jim. Ugh. My upstairs neighbor, who, long story short, got super heated about how I didn't see him in the hallway and say hi one time, and then blamed his outburst on the fact that laundry makes him cranky. He drunkenly tried to get into my apartment last afternoon and then asked if I had a problem with him. When I explained that his behavior made me uneasy, he called me passive-aggressive, and then said that everyone forgets where they live sometimes and he had forgotten where his apartment was because he was humming as he walked up the stairs. It must be so paralyzing to be that allergic to admitting fault. Well, there's a lot more going on with that guy than just hating being wrong. There are any number of things that could be analyzed by a specialist for hours, I'd wager. What an aggressive weirdo. My neighbor would chant "eggplant-sucking witch" over and over every time I'd do basic things like close the door or take a shower. He'd chant hard enough for me to hear through the wall of my apartment. I was far from being loud. That guy just had so many issues. I got sick of it and called over the landlord. The landlord tried closing one door and the creep started chanting again. My landlord went over right then and threatened to kick him out if he didn't stop. Luckily, it worked. I don't live there anymore, but I still remember it vividly. My neighbors neglected their daughter to the point that she'd sneak into our house and steal food from our kitchen. Child Protection Services were called. For some context, I grew up in a rural area on a fairly big property. It had been a large farm that got parceled out as the owner aged. So there were 4 3/4 acre lots and my parents 10 acres behind them. The house was relatively far away from our neighbors. One of the neighbors was an absolute piece of crap. When I was 8, I remember seeing the police lights at his door. Found out when I was a bit older that he had tried to murder his father over his oxy prescription. His father owned the house and the 30-year-old kid lived there rent-free. The kid did a few years in jail, then moved back in with his father who he had tried to kill. He grew green herb on our land and then threatened to kill my mother when my father and I tore it down. But he didn't call the cops. Frequently threatened to attack or kill my mother. I can remember multiple times when I was younger, him banging on our door and screaming threats at my mum. Other times I can remember thinking about the shotty in my father's office, in case our neighbor actually got inside the house. This was 8 to 10 times a year, occurring from my age 8 through 14. He's calmed down a little after a second arrest and some anger management classes. Nowadays, he just has massive bonfires with tons of loud music, and he leaves empties on our property, which is still a jerk move, but better than physical intimidation and death threats. Jerry. When I moved in, he seemed eccentric but harmless. Apparently, my landlord had a conversation with him and told him to leave me alone. This upset Jerry greatly. He cornered me one day while I was unlocking my door and asked me to come sit with him in his apartment. I don't think the place had ever been cleaned, and he had hoarder mentalities. He drank a bottle of wine in about 30 minutes, commenting on all of the sad things in his life. Luckily, he passed out so I could leave. A couple of weeks later, he got into a 3 a.m. fight with his boyfriend, which resulted in his boyfriend trying to get into my apartment for safety and eventually breaking into an empty unit down the hall. Cops were called and Jerry was taken to jail. About a week after that, the same boyfriend was over and a fight ensued. This time, it ended with them doing the deed very loudly. Jerry would flush things you're not supposed to flush down the toilet and would back up the sewage into mine and my neighbor's bathtubs and bathroom sinks. Eventually, he clogged his toilet so badly that he just ripped it from the wall and left it there. The cops came twice to my door to ask if I had seen Jerry lately and asked to search my apartment to make sure I wasn't hiding him. One day, while I was getting ready for work, he came into my apartment with another guy and tried to measure my walls for the renovation he was going to do to combine his and my apartments into one unit. But don't worry, he said, I could just live with him when it was finished. Eventually, Jerry got evicted, but he'd still convince people to let him into the building. For months, his mugshot was pasted on all entrances, saying to not let him in. My neighbor was both a monster and so very dumb. She lived upstairs and was trying to force me to move out, so she put her speakers on her floor pointing straight down and blared them at full volume. The instant it started, I leapt up in outrage at her audacity, but after a few seconds I realized, I really like this song. So I gave it one song, and as it's winding down, I prepare my outrage once again, only to be choked off when the next song is also a perennial favorite. I didn't even bother getting upset before I realized I liked the third song as well. She stopped at midnight when she was legally required to, and then apparently realized she wasn't getting much bang for her buck as far as irritating me went for effort on her part, so she didn't try it anymore. Mine ripped up and threw away my mum's sweet pea plant that she got from her friend who died of cancer. When she complained, the neighbor started ranting about how our garden is a disgrace and an embarrassment to the neighborhood, and we need to replace all the grass and plants with concrete. What a jerk. You know, I'm pretty sure Sundays are for my upstairs neighbors to suplex their children and push over bookcases. Same. I've got a 90-pound woman and a 3-year-old daughter living alone above me, and they apparently wear their cinder block shoes in the house. His dog went through our trash and got sick. The dog ended up needing to go to the vet, and he told me when he bumped into me at my old job, yeah, it was like $5,000 to get her back to health. You're lucky I don't bill you guys. Mind you, this guy let his dog go through everyone's yard and crap wherever it wanted. It's not like the dog escaped, he just willingly didn't care. The last time I saw him, the cops were in his driveway because of an apparent domestic incident. My lovely local lunatic disappeared for hours a day to kill cats and attacked someone at the local park. He used to stand on the footpath drunk every afternoon and yell at my husband about what a B-word I was. Once my husband told him to go home and he shaped up to try and punch my husband, who was about 50 years younger than the neighbor. What was my infraction, you ask? Well, he rang one day to be nosy and ask why my husband's car was home on a workday. I politely thanked him for his call and let him know my husband was sleeping and had a cold. Nothing to worry about. Apparently, I was meant to praise him profusely for being such a caring neighbor, and my husband was meant to follow up with a call once he was awake and also lavish him with praise for caring. Because we didn't do this, we got to hear about it loudly every afternoon until we moved several months later. Yes, I mean, as the saying goes, a good deed is not its own reward. The reward is everyone on the block lining up to give you a down-under kiss and tell you what a wonderful person you were. What a bored old codger. Get a hobby, dude. They yelled at me for entering a shared garage to get some of our stuff. Later claimed I was after his piece, which was stored in a weapon locker with a lock that only he had the key for. They were in their 60s or 70s at the time though, and died last year. Mine screamed obscenities through the wall at my children because they were apparently talking too loudly in the middle of the day, then screamed at us through the walls in the middle of the night so we could see how it felt to be disturbed, regularly dumped his old food out of his bathroom window onto our shared backyard. A rodent infestation took place shortly thereafter. Then stopped paying rent to our landlord because he felt the landlord should have warned him that he might be able to hear his neighbors. Finally dumped his trash on our shared front porch. The landlord did not renew his lease, took him to court, got his unpaid rent money back plus additional payment for damages to the apartment. It was glorious vindication. Mine really partied too hard. As I got home from work one evening, I saw the neighbor chuck a beer bottle at one cop, then throw a punch at the other. Things didn't go well for him after that. I found out after the fact that someone had called a noise complaint because it was something like 11 p.m. on a weekday. This neighbor was a double jerk, though. He had moved off campus with a pair of guys from his frat. The other two guys were cool. We had him over for grilling and vice versa. The guy who got arrested not only screwed himself, but caused so many issues that the other two guys who were on the lease got blacklisted by pretty much every place in town as well. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. One of them was a cowboy builder who even conned his elderly next-door neighbors into getting their roof done for 10 grand, even though their tiles were almost brand new. He then took all of their tiles to retile his own roof for free and put about 10% of his old crappy tiles on their roof and then abandoned the project completely. Don't worry though, we got him arrested and he had to sell his house to pay back his victims, although the cost of his house didn't even come close to covering the full costs. Another neighbor we had would stand in his back garden really early in the morning and then start shooting local birds with a crossbow when they woke up, and he put the bodies in regular bin bags and left them in the street, where foxes ripped them open and dragged dead birds all over the place. Now we have no songbirds in the area. It all started by letting her kids and animals run wild in my backyard. So I dropped about $5,000 on a 6-foot privacy fence that my father-in-law and I built. Then this lady had her water turned off for lack of payment and began taking her number 2s in plastic bags and throwing them over my fence. When confronted about it, she kindly denied and then took to social media. Here's a transcript of her Facebook rant, by the way, and let me stress that although this is an audio thing, on the written letter there are maybe about 1/3 of the words actually spelt right. WTF, just because you find a bag of crap in your yard, you automatically come to frickin' me? Why? 'Cause I'm not like the rest of you snobby rich mother frickers who likes to talk about ya behind your back, but kind of be neighborly to your face or really not even that. What, 'cause I'm a little wilder, younger, tattoos and piercings and black hair? Better watch it, might cast a fricking spell on ya. And so what if I got people coming at night or morning, vice versa? Hell, witch can't even get her freak on, damn. And what just 'cause my yard ain't mowed every 2 days or every weekend, and I'm not spick and span, I got kids and doing by myself everything, so don't expect crap to be perfect. 'Cause that's what you think you are. I'm not rich and I ain't poor. I live life day by day and God put us here to love and be nice to each other, do the right neighborly thing, but no go to have the nose stuck in the air. Snobby judging motherfrickers like yourself, and everybody's day will come and he will judge 'cause he can, and is the only one I think I should F you and every other law-bidden citizen bullcrap. Suck my eggplant B-word. Wow. So, I called the landlord and had an eviction notice served the next day. Last year, my neighbor said he'll bash me because I got his driveway wet while I had the sprinkler going to water my yard. I'm not even joking, he flipped out over his driveway getting water on it. He's a substance addict, so yeah. I mean, he must rage every time it rains. Literally, old man yells at cloud. Mine use our trash bin and ram it full of bags of their gross nappies. I so badly want to take the bags out and leave them on their doorstep. Please allow me to vent because I'm in the throes of this BS at the moment. First, they have 4 mini dachshunds that never shut the frick up. I can't even open my back door without these little dogs going off, and they just leave them outside all day, every day. I enjoy sitting outside on a nice day and reading, but nope, I can't concentrate over the ear-splitting constant yapping. Now, I'm a dog person. I own dogs and love dogs, but this complete lack of consideration is mind-boggling. Second, they rent, and I own, but the crazy wife told me that she owns a 3-foot strip of my property and they'll be moving the fence over. I don't have a huge yard, 3 feet is a lot of space. And did I mention they rent? I brought out my survey to say, no, you don't own it, and no, you aren't going to be moving the fence. And she continued to say that they had their own survey but refused to show it to me. Third, they seem to think it's no big deal if they come into my yard. I came home from work to find they'd moved their water drainage into my backyard. They'd complained about my tree and asked me to cut it down. I said no. They put their garbage cans in my driveway. I've witnessed the wife empty her vacuum cleaner in my driveway. She's blown piles of leaves that haven't even come from my tree into my driveway. Even after I put locks on my gate, she climbed up on a ladder, leaned over the fence and leaf blew all of the leaves in my yard and that were already in piles all over my yard. After that, I put up cameras and I have future plans to press charges for trespassing the next time this crazy witch pulls another stunt. She accused me of calling the police about her daughter's illegal car. I didn't. And then said that I put up a note complaining about her garage. Again, I didn't. She's called the health department multiple times on me for my grass being too long. It wasn't. And the health department didn't cite me. Listen, all I want to do when I come home after a day at work is hang out with my dogs and not fricking talk to anyone or deal with any crap. I don't know what to do about this lady. It's like all these little things she does just toe the line at illegal, and I feel like if I call the police, they're just going to look at it as a petty neighbor squabble instead of harassment. And yes, I've been in touch with the landlord. I completely cut off all contact with the neighbors, and I will now only talk to the landlord. The landlord himself is extremely accommodating and addressed the water drainage thing. The thing is, they're awful neighbors, but apparently they're not bad tenants. They keep their property very clean and tidy and do a lot of work on the house. She's just out of her gosh darn mind. Damn it! At least these awful people usually have the consideration to be equally awful to everyone, so that when the first complaint is lodged, everyone else they've annoyed comes out of the woodwork as well. These absolute monsters might be harder to dislodge. Oh my god, frick these people. I hate them. Busted by SWAT last summer. I had to call into work because of the barricades. There were no arrests, and I never really got the story on that. While we live in houses, we don't have fences around the backyard. They got a dog. They used to sit on their porch while the dog roamed the neighborhood. Then they'd just let him out to roam the neighborhood while in their house. In the winter, they'd put on a coat and leave him out for hours. Then they'll stand on their porch screaming, "Pete! Pete!" forever at 11 p.m. Pete has disappeared. I think someone else in the neighborhood took him in. Now they have another puppy named Zero. He's probably about 12 weeks and of course is wandering the neighborhood. We can hear them screaming the hell out of each other. So can people across the street. Police are out at least once a week arresting one of them, then they bail each other out. They've borrowed jumper cables and never returned them, then came over last week asking for jumper cables. My boyfriend told them that we already loaned them to him and they weren't returned. The neighbors then told us they were going to sue us for accusing them of thievery. Oh, and then there was the lawnmower saga. Last summer, they came over and asked to borrow our riding lawnmower. My boyfriend currently works more than 75 hours a week during summer, and the one thing that he despises is lawn work. So he made a deal. The neighbor can borrow our lawnmower anytime he needs it, as long as he mows our lawn each and every single time. That went smoothly for all of 3 weeks. The neighbor comes over and tells us that we need a new battery and that 2 of the blades are dull. Clearly, beggars can be choosers in his eyes. Whatever, my boyfriend goes out and spends money on a new battery and new blades for the mower. However, after doing that, the lawnmower just sat. My boyfriend absolutely hates leaving personal property out. He goes next door and tells the neighbor that the lawn needs to be mowed soon and that there was an agreement, and the neighbor isn't standing by his part. We get the usual sob story about how he's sick, blah blah blah. Boyfriend tells him that we're leaving tomorrow on a Sunday and we'll be back the following Monday afternoon, and that when he gets back he wants the lawn mowed. If the neighbor can't do it, my boyfriend will just mow our lawn and be done with it. The neighbor tells us that he's definitely going to do it. Well, no. We got back Monday and the grass was growing around the lawnmower because it was never moved. Boyfriend got straight out of his truck, mowed our lawn, leaving the perfect line between our property and theirs, and locked the mower up in the shed. Neighbor comes over 2 days later going on and on about how he was just about to do it. Boyfriend says that no, obviously he wasn't. He had 8 days to do it. It never got done, and why is he coming over after 2 days after we've locked it up? They ended up getting a ticket a few days later for the grass being too tall. They still never mowed it or took care of it. The city came out, mowed their lawn, and left them a hefty bill for it. They tried telling us it was our responsibility to pay it because we, quote, took away their opportunity to be self-sufficient. Rang my doorbell at 4 a.m. over and over and asked me to go with him because there was an emergency and it was important. I went with him and he took me over to his car and started asking what I thought of it and looked very proud. In other words, this guy rang every apartment in the building at 4 a.m. to get people to look at his new car. One of my fellow tenants in a shared house at university. Each was a self-contained apartment with a bathroom, kitchen, and bedroom. The guy started smoking green herb, which I had no issue with, but as I was studying law and frequently met with police as part of my criminal justice module, I requested he keep it to his room rather than the communal areas of the house. He obliged, initially. I then went home for winter break, and upon returning I found lines of white snow half done on the kitchen counter, even with a rolled-up £10 note and the semi-empty bag. I stayed clear, and later that night, at 2 a.m., heard a knock on the door. A guy with blood dripping from his head was standing there shouting, "Rob! Get your butt out here! You've ripped me off!" Turns out his habit had progressed to dealing, and his supplier, to whom he owed a cut, was the blood-soaked man on my doorstep barging his way in. On a near-daily basis, he throws temper tantrums, yelling, stomping, and throwing tools, slamming doors, and screaming at his family over some petty nonsense. He's a crappy person, I feel bad for his family, and I'm genuinely annoyed each time I hear his voice. IT workers. Who are the most enraging people you have to put up with? I've worked in IT for a few years now and have been messing around with computers of my own and fixing them for friends as far back as I can remember. I understand that not everyone is good with computers. If they were, I wouldn't have a job. I have no problem helping people through things, giving them information, or fixing things. What I do have a problem with is people who mess that crap up and tell me I don't know what I'm talking about when I tell them how to fix it or how I already fixed it. Oh yeah, your hard drive is completely corrupt. If you listen, you can actually hear it grinding on the inside there. There's nothing I can reasonably do to fix that. But I need my files. I'm sorry, the drive is physically broken. I can't recover anything from it. I thought you were good with computers. I'm just telling you what I found out. Well, it wasn't that bad before I bought it to you. You broke it. Frick these people. Someone came into our retail store and asked to buy a windproof router because the wind keeps blowing my Wi-Fi signal away. I'm pretty sure my eyes started bleeding. The person told me, "The game won't run. It's telling me I need to update my graphics drivers if I want to play. What should I do?" Update your graphics card drivers. Oh, okay, thanks. Telling everyone when they come into work that the internet is down because she can't view one particular website. The computer forgot my password. No, I swear I've tried it like 30 times and it doesn't work. It keeps saying locked out. I feel like I did most of these when I was a child or in my early teens, so the fact that there are apparently multiple adults, presumably with office, computer-based jobs, who are doing these sorts of things constantly is frankly upsetting. This woman called my college help desk, she was a professor, and told me that her dead brother-in-law was controlling her PC. She also wanted to tell me that she's not crazy. Turns out her batteries were going in her wireless mouse and the cursor was just moving around kinda funny. My 64-year-old colleague said, "I've just had it with this computer. I can't even find the internet." I say, "You're using it right now to see your Gmail." No, this is my Google. I need the internet." And a few people here are saying, well, they're old, and that would be a valid excuse, but this person's position revolved greatly around data entry in a course and program management system for a college. One of our management systems is run off a website called AITA. Knowing how to access the internet is a good idea for that job. The other day, the office manager was trying to send out a message on our mailing list program. She asked, "How do I create a new email?" Oh, you see at the top there where it says Create Mail? Oh, where do I put the email name? Oh, look at the top where it says Email Name. Oh, where do I select which email list to send it to? See at the top where it says Email List? And on and on and on for 20 minutes. The instructions are all right there. I swear half the time these people act like my job is to read things to them. At that point, I start reversing the process and ask them to find it for me. Can you find a button that looks like it relates to creating an email? And when they argue, I tell them the true fact that telling someone where something is only reinforces to their brain that they don't need to remember it, whereas finding it for themselves helps them remember. Then they tell me to shut up and tell them where the button is. I wrote a script to do some maintenance on the computers on the network after hours. Clear temporary files, garbage files, defrag, among others. As you know, no one else does this, and I was having to manually do it on a few computers, so I figured I'd script it out and do it to everyone, and get it all done at once over the weekend. Monday morning, all hell breaks loose. Apparently, the number 2 in the office had been storing all of her important files in the recycle bin, not on the network share like everyone else, but files created on the desktop and then deleted, in which she'd open the recycle bin, undelete, and they'd be back on the desktop. Unfortunately, I had no backups, as the backup procedures I had did not in fact back up the recycle bin on all the computers. I ended up pulling a 50-hour shift redacting and trying to manually put the files back, of which I got about 80% of them despite the defrag. I was in deep crap for about 2 months after that. This was back in 2003 when disk space was more of an issue and multiple desktops had out-of-disk space crashes, in which I manually fixed. I just decided after doing the 4th one to write a script to do the whole network, and yes, I did give notice on the Tuesday before Friday when I executed it. Some people just make silly mistakes. I'm pretty sure I Googled Google before these things never hurt anyone. I once worked for someone who didn't think that IT needed access to network drives to back them up. It's so much more dangerous when you can't do your job. Also, she read some book about lean and IT and only took some weird amalgamation of streamlining software to reduce the number of mouse clicks. So our test scripts literally counted mouse clicks and I had to recode modules because there were too many touches. So instead of making intuitive interfaces, I had to worry about clicks. I wish I were kidding. I had a boss that prided himself on never touching a computer. Web TV was the greatest thing ever, so the company website had to be built around Web TV. They also insisted on having a gosh-awful MIDI file playing on the website. I had to fake takedown notice emails from the RIAA to get him to finally remove it. I never understood how people can take pride in not knowing something. When everything works, why do we even pay you IT guys? And when one thing is broken, why do we even pay you IT guys? Yeah, it seems like a pretty thankless task. Hopefully there are at least a few people who know that when everything is working perfectly, it's actually a sign that IT are doing their jobs wonderfully. I don't get mad at people for not knowing things anymore. That's fine. Really, the things that miff me these days are the following statements. It's not my job to learn how to do that. Oh, I'm computer illiterate. Computers hate me. That kind of thing. Externalizing the problems and not taking ownership of the fact that working with technology is part of your job, and using the "I'm just not a computer person" mantra as an excuse to remain willfully ignorant. I did recently have a user screenshot a problem, paste it into Word, and then fax it to me to open a ticket. That was pretty funny. During a large-scale worm outbreak several years ago, the building one of our guys was working damage control in lost power. It was during a severe thunderstorm. One of our users looked at him, wide-eyed, and shakily asked, Did the virus do that? I rebooted. No, you didn't. Your PC takes 2 minutes to reboot, so you've either lied, logged off and back in, turned the monitor on and off, or did something else. I told you to click Start, version dependent, next step, and then restart. You ignored me and did something else. Cease your lying and/or not listening to me ways. I don't care if you don't want to reboot, it'll fix your problem. Otherwise, I'd tell you not to move so I can see the issue myself. Oh, is this the part where you take over my screen? I don't like it. It's scary, like a ghost. I rarely begrudge someone for not understanding what I do. I'm sure I've said some stupid things about other people's areas of expertise. What I do get irked over is when it's trivialized. I've had a couple of people who barely know me approach me with a big idea that they'd like to get off the ground. One guy wanted to make a World of Warcraft clone, more or less. He knows I write software, but no idea what I do. I work on big data systems and the like. So to him, a programmer is just a programmer. No matter that I know as much about how to make a game like World of Warcraft as I know about brain surgery, but I do know enough to know that one programmer who is not even tangentially related to the end product in expertise is probably not going to get the job done. He had no clue about what making a game like that entailed. I think he figured that Blizzard was run by 4 guys in a garage or something. Another guy had a brilliant idea for a website. Hint, it's a crappy idea. Hilariously crappy. He has no business experience, no development experience, no marketing experience. But he tells me the classic line, I'll give you 5% ownership. Ownership in what? Your pipe dreams? And then I tell him, no thanks, and it's always the same. You have no idea of what you're missing out on. Oh, but I do, and I'm really not missing much. People have no clue about how much work goes into the stuff they use. They figure that since Google is only a logo and a single text box, it should be super duper easy to create that part. I don't need the maps created at first, we just need a search engine, and then we can make one that's better than Google. Once it's running, we'll start working on a new map thing. Which is another actual line I've been pitched. Right. Because nobody else is trying to do that right now. Search Bing for Google alternatives and let me know what you find. You know, besides irony, the idea guy is the most useless person out there. If all you have is an idea and you're going to pitch it to a developer, save yourself the time and just ask him to say no thanks to you in advance. Anyone who agrees won't be competent. Anyone who's competent won't agree. I've been in IT for longer than I care to admit, but my absolute favorite, well, a coworker came to look over my shoulder while I was working on an application. She looked at my browser and said, "Why does that say Mozilla Firefox?" "Because I'm using the Firefox browser." "Mine doesn't say that." "You may not be using the Firefox browser then." She goes back to her desk and calls me. "It says Internet Explorer?" "That's because you're using Internet Explorer." "Make it go away." "What?" "Make it go away." "Make what go away?" "I don't want it to say Internet Explorer on my machine, and I don't want it to say Mozilla Firefox on your machine. Make it go away." You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I'm not IT and it wasn't enraging, but my mother called me once from her new iPhone 4S and said, "I can't get the phone to stop playing music. The only reason it's stopped is because I've called you. Help me." "Press pause, Mum." It was more funny than anything. "Did you really just tell me to turn it off and on again? I hope you're making a joke and referencing the IT crowd." "Yes, your computer missed the group policy update and you need to log out and back in. Shut up and let me do my job." It's not really something they told me, but the act of washing your hands in pizza grease and then touching every part of my screen. Sweet Lord. Have I accidentally come into a story submission for IT staff at a kindergarten? Because surely there are no adults getting pizza prints all over someone's LCD screen. That's outrageous. Customer. I changed my password and I can't use my computer anymore. So I say, "Alright, I can probably reset it. Do you know what operating system you're using?" Blank stare from the other end. I say, "Some OSs are easier to reset than others. I need to know what OS you're using." "Oh, I'm on the Comcast Internet Pipeline operating system." "Awesome. So that's actually your internet provider. When you turn on the computer, what does the screen look like?" Blank stare. Does it say Windows 98, Windows ME, Windows XP, Windows 2000, Windows Vista, or Windows 7? Wait. Is it even a Microsoft product you're using, or a Mac? Of course it's not a Mac, silly. I don't have the money for a Mac. So what operating system is it running? Blank stare. Never mind. Just bring your computer in. It's going to be $200. So, I have a printer with a USB cable coming out of it and a USB port on my computer. How do I plug it in? I think a part of me died a little bit when I heard that. It's broken. Why is it that clients are always so vague? Just because you mistyped an email address or didn't plug it in or chose the wrong printer, it doesn't mean your computer is broken. People assume that we know how to program websites and iPhone apps because we know how to set up telco or replace your hard drive. Nothing happens when I click the link. Nothing happens is client speak for the thing I expect to happen doesn't happen. If someone tells me they click a button and nothing happens, the one thing I can absolutely guarantee is that something does happen, something interesting and diagnostically important, which the client refuses to put into any other words than nothing happens. Maybe they get an error message, maybe they get a white screen, maybe an Ajax loading GIF appears, but hangs there forever. Maybe the browser crashes altogether. Maybe the whole computer crashes, catches fire, and quickly spreads, killing the client's newborn infant. The client will still describe this as, "I tried, but nothing happened." Ugh, what do you even do here then? When I told her I had to wait for the vendor to contact me back after they looked at the issue, I calmly said, "I make sure you can do your job," and then I just walked out of her office. Most EUs have no idea their programs are from a specific vendor who is the go-to source when stuff hits the fan, like today. You can't win, really. Every once in a while you have these small victories. Someone has a problem, you remote into their workstation, it's something easy, you click through a few menus quickly and some screens which look impressive because of all the numbers and tech jargon, and then presto, they think you're a hero. But most of this job is waiting. Waiting for when you're needed if you don't have anything else which needs to be done, or you're in a panic when things go wrong. It's extremely stressful. It's either, why are we paying him if all he seems to do is sit around, or why are we paying him if these things go down? You're damned if you do, and damned if you don't. What version of Windows do you have? XP? 7? 8.1? Internet Explorer 10? Most times when someone sees me doing something in the command prompt or terminal for any reason, apparently I'm hacking. No, I'm not hacking, I'm updating my software. No, I'm not hacking, I'm talking on IRC. Friend going to college for computer science and needed a new laptop. We were having a conversation about what to download first. I said, "You should probably get something like Chrome or something similar as the very first thing. I use Internet Explorer, I don't like those other ones, they give you viruses." She got a virus within a week on her brand new laptop. Going to college for computer sciences. I couldn't facepalm hard enough. Are you in Windows 7? XP? I don't know, I'm not a computer expert. Are you an expert in being a total moron then? My memory stick comes up as FAT32. Does that mean I've got too much stuff on it? Is it saying it's too fat? True fricking story. No way. The narrator refuses to believe that this one is true. I can't exist on a planet where someone believes that the IT pioneers of the world decided to indicate a drive has reached capacity by fat-shaming it. I don't want to be in the same species that has this. Those that hover over my shoulder asking questions that only slow me down. What's that? Why do you do that? How does that work? What are you doing? Honestly, I don't even mind being asked questions 99% of the time. What irks me are the people that have 50 million irrelevant questions that actually slow down my progress and interrupt my train of thought. If you want me to train you on how to do my job, you're getting an invoice that has a line item for X hours of training at $1,500 an hour. Then there's those people that used to be in IT years ago and somehow feel that makes them the experts. You were in IT. You've been out for 20 years. I've been doing this for the past 15 years. I'm the damn expert. Quit telling me how to do my job. You're wrong. Sit down and let me get you back to doing what you are the expert at now, which is not IT. I could do your job. Good, so I can go back to doing something useful and you'll take care of your own problems from now on. I find things other so-called techies say are more enraging. However, a few years ago, I had a client that wanted her PC cleaned up. In the end, I installed MSE and MBAM and configured it. A few months later, I got an email from her. She says she might have a virus and for me to check into it. I remote in and see that MSE is gone and Symantec AV is installed. I ask why she removed MSE and brought Symantec. She started her answer with, "Well, I felt," and I just stopped listening to her feelings reason. Soldiered on, fixed her problem, and sent her a bill. In short, some people don't think they get a good product unless they pay for it. I've seen this in different areas of business. I work in a call center. Outside of work, I'm as IT as you can get, fixing computers and whatnot. My day job is dealing with calls about people's accounts at a credit union. I enjoy it for the most part, aside from the fact that we have to tell our members about services that we offer, and we have to refer 10% of our calls. So this one girl calls, I check the date of birth, and she's 19, calling for her balance. The first thing I do is ask if she uses our online banking, as I get a referral and she's young enough not to use the excuse of not knowing how. She responds, no, well, I don't know. I mean, I look at my balances on my phone, but I never go online. Frustration intensifies. When I sit down at a user's machine to put my talent and years of training and experience to work, and they say, when you're done playing with it, let me know so I can get some real work done. On a computer that they need to do their job, that they screwed up with their quest for pretty wallpapers or cute animated mouse pointers or great deals on vacations or fortunes from Nigerian princes or whatever. Ugh, there are so many annoying things that users do. Emailing simply with, my insert device or software is broken. Please try to elaborate, explain what you're doing and what happens. It's a complete waste of my time to have to probe you for information like you're 15 years old. On the same vein, they complain that the problem hasn't been resolved, but they never responded to your attempts to get more information. They'll walk into my office, stand there for 5 minutes while I'm on the phone with someone else because they just couldn't wait and their problem is incredibly important. It's a distraction to the problem I'm working on and unfair to all the other users who submitted their questions and issues correctly. 9 out of 10 times, it's not an emergent issue that needs my attention immediately. There's times where the company board say, sorry, we don't have any money to spend on that. And we really need to replace machines that are broken beyond repair. Meanwhile, they have enough money to buy water columns for the waiting room that bubble up constantly. It's to the point that I'm telling people to complain to the doctors on the board. Constant due date for projects that just aren't possible. Opening multiple new offices at the same time for a 3-person department, while also still being responsible for other projects and daily help desk support. They demo new software that clearly won't work, then buy it and tell us to make it work. They get upset when we can't deliver that or it takes a while. I just had a user come into my office to ask me to order her a new headset for her phone. I told her she'd need to speak to finance, but while discussing it, she explained further. People she's on the phone with constantly can't hear her, and she ends up yelling so they can. I tell her, why don't you bring it here first and see if we can't fix it? She gets the headset and I'm able to determine it's the voice tube. In the end, it's solved, no extra money spent. I don't understand why she wouldn't just let me know she was having an issue. I constantly have users that won't call or email to let us know about their issues. They'll do one of two things. Wait until I happen to be at their locations, which I've only left enough time for the issue that I came for, or they wait until it's thoroughly upset them and then send me an email with expletives complaining about the issue. They do not explain the problem, just complain. As an IT person, I can understand that not everyone has levels of knowledge about electronics that I do. When I've explained the simple things to you multiple times, that's when I get upset. I shouldn't have to show you how to attach something to your email every single time you do it. Either take a note or Google it at that point. I'm not your personal IT professional, I support an entire company of people who have issues. Yes, your simple thing comes across as a waste of my time. What product self-destructed the first time you used it? $5 shades. Bent over to pick up a quarter that I'd dropped, glasses fell down off of my shirt. Plastic cracked, lenses popped out. That was a $5 quarter that I picked up. A baseball bat. Not kidding. First throw, first hit, and snap. An oven timer. We did a minute test just to see how loud it was. The hammer inside shook the timer so hard, springs and screws started falling out. Like straight out of a Tom and Jerry episode, the amount of crap that fell out of this thing. It stopped ringing when it finally broke itself. Now we have an electronic oven timer. There's less shaking. A can opener from the dollar store. I paid $1 and got $0 value from it. I also had a hell of a time opening a can of beans. I had a candy floss maker when I was younger. It lasted a day. My brother received one of those Air Hogs remote control airplanes for Christmas. The very first flight, it went out of range from the remote and just kept going into the horizon. We searched for it, but never found it. At the time, it was devastating for him. My family didn't have a lot of money, so we couldn't get much for Christmas. That was pretty much his only gift that year, and my parents couldn't afford to replace it. They're in a better place financially now, so it's a funny Christmas story we tell every year. The cookie tongs at my old work. We had a raggedy box for cookies with a broken lid and no spare tongs to grab them. We had to waste plastic gloves every time a customer wanted cookies. It wasn't that big a deal, but we got a lot of complaints about it for some reason. Like 30% of our Google reviews were about the fricking cookie box and how we got them out. So the company finally gave us a nice new glass display case and a set of tongs to appease the masses. The first time I used them, they snapped in two. I've never seen someone as heartbroken from some plastic from the dollar store as my manager that day. Apparently, the dollar stores in the States are way worse than they've been in any country I've ever lived in. I feel like the stuff the rest of us can get is garbage and short-lived, but doesn't literally fall apart the second it's used for its intended purpose. It was the year 2000. I wanted a Skip-It toy really badly, but I grew up super poor. Got a generic one from my parents one day. I put it on, rotated it once, and then shot-put-launched the counterball across the driveway. Could not repair. Immediately in the recycling bin. Black & Decker once sold an electric under-cabinet can opener that worked only once. As we were throwing it out, I looked up online reviews and found that every review said the same thing. It worked once and then never again. It was a can opener, not a cans opener. My printer. I'm not buying a Canon printer for the third time. I should have just learned my lesson the second time. My brother and I got Stretch Armstrong for Christmas one year in the late 1970s. We lived in Syracuse, New York, and my parents would hide the presents in the attic. The attic wasn't well insulated, and Syracuse gets very cold in the winter. When we opened Stretch on Christmas morning, he was as hard as a rock. Easy now. My dad told us not to stretch him until he warmed up. As soon as my dad left the room, my brother and I decided he was warm enough. Nope. We immediately broke Stretch's leg off. There was some weird gel inside. Sorry, Stretch, we hardly knew ya. A $70 pair of Wolford nylons. I brought the right size. I even double-checked with the sales associate. We took them out of the package, and as soon as I went to put them on, they basically disintegrated. Oof. A Johnny. I started my love life off the right way, with a teen pregnancy scare. A crappy bra. Literally had it on for not even an hour and the underwire popped out and stabbed me in the chest. Stupid underwire. I brought an old rifle called an SKS. It was covered in preservative grease. I went home and disassembled it to clean it, and disassembled everything. Well, there's a lot of springs under tension in that rifle. It's amazingly complicated internally for what seems to be a simple weapon. I turned a little lever to see if I could get a part out, and it launched a spring deep into my backyard, and I never saw it again. My Digimon Greymon toy that I bought in a stand during the monthly fair. It broke my heart, and I've never brought anything else from that fair. My friend's wire saw to cut some campfire wood. His response to it breaking? Well, I guess that's why it was only $5. I bought a high-quality coffee grinder, Burr, with good coarseness controls, and the first time I turned it on, the timer handle broke and it started grinding forever. I still use that grinder, but now I have to plug it in to turn it on and unplug it to turn it off. The grinds are great at many sizes, coarse for cold brew and V60 and Chemex, and also very fine for AeroPress. It's just annoying that the switch broke. I saved up for months to buy Skate for Xbox 360, finally got it, and after putting the disc in, my console got knocked over and screwed the disc up. I never got past the menu, and I had to wait 3 months to buy it again because my parents refused to help me pay for it. This charging case for my phone. The one thing you shouldn't do is remove it vertically. I did exactly that. The dollar store version of a ball and paddle. Stupid elastic came off the board that was held together by a normal staple. I brought a really cool kind of military-looking jacket from Forever 21. When I got home and took it out of the bag, a button fell off. Later that night, I wore it out, and over the course of the evening, every single button came off. Never shopped at Forever 21 again. I mean, on cheap clothing, you should reinforce the threads on buttons. You just grab a sewing needle and some thread and go over it once or twice. It can be the difference between garbage and not garbage. Although cheap, fast fashion stores are hit and miss with quality. I brought a Forever 21 shirt that lasted 3 washes, another I've had for 6 years without any holes or rips. The tremolo bar from my first electric guitar, a Squier Strat. I inserted it slightly misaligned into the screw rail, and when I screwed it in, it literally melted from the torsion strength, broke apart, sealed the hole, and left the bridge pulled upwards. In consequence, the strings floated half an inch from the bridge. I didn't tell my parents because it was my sweet 16th gift, and they both seemed so happy when they gave it to me. Nowadays, I realized the repair would have been $30 tops. I still used the heck out of it though. It gained some massive tone and would occasionally detune, but I loved it despite that. On the flip side, my fingers became hella strong due to the added pressure, and whenever I used my friends' guitars, I felt like Piccolo or Rock Lee when they dropped the heavy clothes. Their strings felt like butter. 3 out of the 4 Razer products I've ever owned. PC gaming equipment. A 4x4 Rubik's Cube. An expensive nutcracker soldier given as a Christmas gift. I put the nuts in its mouth, worked the lever, and his jaw broke. Were you putting the right sort of nuts in the toy's mouth? Sorry, that was a low-hanging fruit. Pun intended. But for real, this led the narrator to find out that the toys called nutcrackers aren't actually made to crack nuts. They're just called that. Fascinating. Can opener. Went through 4 in 2 days. Ended up just borrowing my mum's. Never gave it back because it's the only one I've owned that's lasted. Damn thing is older than me. The tent I won for selling $800 worth of Boy Scout popcorn? It broke while I was setting it up in my parents' backyard. Never sold again. Not because the rewards sucked, but because the popcorn was so terrible and overpriced that I felt guilty about it. I would have preferred to just straight up ask people for donations. The tax write-off would have been worth more than that fricking popcorn. A cheap dollar store frisbee. I threw it to the dogs exactly 1 time. They returned from the other side of the backyard with it in 5 pieces. A cast iron skillet. First time preheating it on the stove, it cracked clean in half. It was very loud and nearly scared the life out of me. 9 years later, I still have the replacement pan Freddy's gave me. One time I sort of got into Rubik's Cubes and I decided to buy one from eBay. It was really cheap, something like $2. I didn't even notice until a few hours later that the delivery was from Hong Kong and that it would take about a month to arrive. Didn't really bother finding a different one. 1 month later, my interest in them had died off. I didn't even remember about the order until it arrived. A whole month for delivery, and it fell apart as soon as I tried to use it. I hate to reinforce the stereotype that things made in China have bad quality, especially because I am Chinese, and to be fair, it was really cheap, but I mean, yeah. I bought my 16-year-old son a used car as a birthday gift. I was 20 miles away from the dealership and I put down the sun visor. The plastic visor holder clip broken too. I would have enjoyed this way more if the car had broken. You wouldn't have. That would have just been the price of comedy. Oh, what broke for me, you ask? Oh, nothing. Just my heart. They don't make wooden bats like they used to. I bought one a year ago. It cracked on the very first pitch. I have a George Brett baseball from my childhood that I could probably chop down a tree with. A compact digital camera I got for my parents for Christmas in 2006. After opening gifts, I turned on the camera and was looking at it and wanted to go downstairs to my room. I tripped down some stairs, dropped it, and the lens smashed. Those goddamn sponge mops. I almost always end up breaking it just trying to get the plastic wrap off. So technically, before I used it. The first winter I owned a car in South Dakota, I bought an ice scraper which immediately snapped the first time I went to use it. I ended up holding it by the blade end and doing it that way for a longer time than I care to admit. I won a decently nice Shakespeare fishing rod and reel set in a raffle at work. I had it for a few months, unused, until I got the opportunity to go to a barbecue someplace that had a dock on the river. I was going to fish with my new rod, finally! I got it all set up, hook tied on and baited, a weight and a floater, and I got to cast for the very first time, and mid-cast, the screw holding the reel onto the rod unscrewed. I guess I didn't notice it was super loose. And with my cast, the reel flips off into the river. I was pretty devastated. I even offered some kids swimming like $20 if they could find it, but the water was too deep and murky, and it was never seen again. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My brand new wireless mouse. I broke the dongle by dropping my laptop squarely onto it. My brand new Range Rover. Test drove it, bought it, got handed the keys, then could not get it to start. The mechanic comes out and gets it to start, saying I wasn't stepping on the brake hard enough. Fast forward to 10 days later, it doesn't start. Towed to the dealer for service on July 29th. Still at the dealer to this day. A veggie spiralizer from Pampered Chef. One of those 30cm rulers that you fold in half. Year 8 rolled around, I still had my Y7 one and it snapped. Whatever, it was a little worn, I wasn't angry. I got a brand new shiny one. Took it out of its packaging, put it in my pencil case, took it out, only for it to fricking snap immediately the very first time I unfolded it. I was fricking annoyed. It was a crappy £2 ruler, and that's like £200 in kid money. A screwdriver from the dollar store. I needed it to put some furniture together, but it broke halfway through screwing in the first 2 screws. I wound up using a different screwdriver for the remaining screws. It turned out that the bookcase I was building needed nails hammered into the back, but I didn't have a hammer. I wound up using the handle of the screwdriver to bash the nails into the back. I once got an assortment of fancy teas as a gift. They came with a glass infuser. It looked like a test tube with slits in it to let the water through. I used it once and discovered that while it was easy to put the dry tea leaves in, there was no easy way to get the used ones out. I've got a mesh tea ball with a hinge on it now. Yeah, that seems needlessly finicky. The things some people will go through just to have something that's prettier or fancier looking. My first Android smartphone. Went out to play Pogo and dropped it. Without any protection, as I'd ordered that online the same day. I wanted to die. A bamboo bath tray. I tested it out with my book and my wine in bed a few times to make sure it was sturdy. After the dry run, I used it in the bath. It worked until I picked it up to put it away. Literally fell apart in my hands. My boss's jet ski. I got invited to a party at his place. He had a decently sized pond on his land. People were taking turns on the jet ski, so I decided to give it a go. I made one turn on it and it flooded, so I had to drag it back to the dock, having no clue what happened to it, while fearing that I'd broken it completely. I bought a cheap tripod off Amazon and the handle snapped right off the first time I went to turn the camera. Broke before we even used it. My mum and I were coming home from a trip to IKEA. We got a couple of things, one of them being a white colander to drain things in. We pulled into the driveway and started unloading all of the crap. Before we could even get in the door, I dropped the colander and it hit the concrete just right to where the paint on the bottom edge chipped completely off and totally dented the bottom. We still use it to this day, even though the bottom is a little rusted by now where the coating chipped off, but the food never touches that part. It's a joke between my mum and I. My $2,100 laptop. Sent it back 3 times during my freshman year of college, and finally got a new motherboard. Dell customer service has a disgusting amount of room for improvement. A foldable Ninja Star I bought from a gas station 15 years ago. I spent half my paycheck on that. Piece of crap. I got this RC car for Christmas one year, and for some reason I thought it would work in water like a boat. It didn't. It broke. I got my braces fixed once. I broke them while eating less than an hour later. A laptop I purchased. I got a laptop and brought it home to install everything and install the programs I needed for school, just to find out the disk drive didn't work. So I went back and returned it and got another one. Got back into my car and drove home to open the laptop to discover all of the keys on the keyboard were in the wrong spots and they didn't type the same letters as a standard keyboard. So I turned around, got back in my car, and drove back to the store. Got my third laptop, checked it in the store to make sure it was all correct, and that one worked great. My Gillette Fusion blades. It was the first time I tried shaving and had one heck of a beard. The blade broke before my beard did. Also, my barber would rather avoid shaving my beard with a shaving machine as it's not capable of entirely removing the hair. He'd much rather burn it. These days, I shave with a safety razor, and that seems to do the trick. A stupid, cheap ice cream scoop with one of those wiper blades. Screw that piece of junk. I'm going to buy a deluxe scoop with no moving parts and is all one solid piece. I bought a Kindle. I connected it to my computer, put it down on the stool next to my desk, about a foot off the ground, and while turning, I hit it with my leg and it slipped off the desk and the screen shattered. The kind where the colors bleed all over, but clearly it's still turning on and off. I debated bringing it to the store and claiming that I unpacked it like that, since only about half an hour had passed, but ultimately I felt like the lie was too big. I read books on my phone now. I've been dipping since I was 13. I tried to switch to a vape last year. I didn't know what I was getting into, so I thought $60 was a decent price for my first vape. It broke in the first week. Copenhagen Mint is my favorite. Windows 10. I mean, how can you break it when it's broken to begin with? My friend bought an umbrella from a stand on the street, and as she was opening it, the top part just flew off as she stared open-mouthed for several seconds. That happened a couple of years ago, and I'm still laughing. I used a brand new Spalding basketball pump on my brand new Spalding basketball. Popped instantly. I would pay to be a fly on the wall watching that kid's heartbroken look, because as devastating as it would be when it happens to you at that age, you got to admit it's kind of funny watching that level of heartbreak on a kid. Not so much the thing breaking, but when I was 12 I got my first pogo stick. I decided to test it out on the nice, level pavement of our driveway. 1 bounce, 2 bounce, 3 bounce, tipped over sideways and shattered my elbow in 3 places. In other words, the pogo broke me. The earbuds I just bought. Good day. A camping lantern. Broke the very first night. We spent the rest of the trip using glow sticks and an Eddie Bauer wallet light. As some background, I went camping with my best friend's family when we were kids. They bought about half the camping gear at Big Lots and included the lantern. It broke immediately and we spent the rest of the trip without consistent light. We used several glow sticks and a little wallet light. One of those credit card slim LED things when we actually needed light. They never went camping again. A pretty Christmas tree ornament. I hung it up to take a picture and it slipped off the branch and shattered. Any prize I ever won from an arcade. My laptop. I just took it home from the store and was on the couch setting it up while my 2 older brothers were wrestling, and they managed to fall on it and snap it in half. They always bullied me, like most older brothers do, and they had to split the cost of a new one. It was one of the best days of my life. Runcam HD 2. A nice, inexpensive GoPro alternative? Nope. Utter garbage, and Runcam stands behind literally nothing. Died after recording 15 minutes of testing and the cat. Call your retailer, we have no interest in helping you. 3 times was enough, but even at $89, it's not an affordable alternative to anything. A $1 knife from Walmart. I took it out of the blister pack and it completely fell apart in my hand. I bought a house during a hurricane. The roof leaked the first night we slept there. A $2,000 drone. It was 3 feet above the ground and about 6 feet away from me with low battery after flying around for a bit. I knew it was low battery, so I brought it down while it was counting down to return home. Yeah, I didn't know that it actually shoots straight up to the altitude before returning to me. Straight up into a tree. Busted. An overpriced coffee machine that takes a little plastic pod. It never worked, never bought one again, never drank coffee again. It was not meant to be. A handy stitch, one of those as seen on TV small handheld sewing machines. Seemed like such a great idea, and it broke the first time I tried it out. Got a fancy juicer for my birthday one year. Immediately threw the only fruit I had into it, peaches. Goodbye, fancy juicer. A fog machine. It worked for like a whole minute and then just shut off. About 20 minutes later, it was still plugged in, it spotted out a tiny bit of fog and finally just stopped working. I bought a pack of AA batteries from this discount chain called Grocery Outlet. Took them home, popped them in my Discman, yeah, it was a while ago, and it played the first 8 seconds of the first song and then died. I mean, I guess technically they didn't break, but Jesus. What's the best troll you've pranked somebody with? I convinced a roommate that Microsoft was coming after him for piracy and that he needed to go down to the courthouse to meet their lawyer for a settlement. In high school, I posted on my wall, "Wow, Facebook automatically censors your password when you post it onto Facebook. Then a bunch of asterisks to indicate that I'd typed in my password and it had censored it. Try it out for yourself. I got 3 passwords that day. I convinced my roommate that he had herpes by stealing his phone and changing my name in his contacts to a girl he had a fling with a few months ago. A little bit of backstory concerning the girl. After he stopped talking to her, she got pregnant and everyone would attack him saying it was his, but he refused to talk to her. So I went ahead and texted him the following. Listen, I know we haven't talked in a while and I'm sure you know I'm pregnant. I just wanted to ease your mind and let you know that you're not the father. But during my doctor's visit, they told me I tested positive for herpes downstairs. You should get tested. Bye. He started freaking out, and when the guys and I told him it was a prank, he threw his new iPhone against the wall, completely destroying the thing. He then proceeded to storm out of the house, get in his car, and disappeared for about 5 hours. Oh, and this went down on April Fool's Day. By far the best prank me or any of my friends have witnessed. Pal, if you see this, way to be a good sport. I said that the Rickroll subreddit was a sad sub to visit, except I actually hid a link to a Rickroll in the link. Thousands of people got Rickrolled that day. It feels good, man. Not me, my dad. He's entirely convinced my grandmother that the word dinosaur is pronounced dinosaur instead of dinosaur. It's extremely subtle and not really that incorrect, which is why, 1, it was really easy to convince her, and 2, it's been 5 years and she still says it like that. He does this with a new word every year or so. That's simultaneously such a low-level troll, but it still seems so damn mean. Maybe because it's setting up a woman of undisclosed but presumably advanced age for some kind of slightly embarrassing social encounter where she might be too old to unlearn the habit? When the DayZ mod first came out, me and my friends played on a server that was set so that you spawned with nothing but a bandage and had reduced loot spawns in buildings, which made it quite hard for new players to get started. So we'd fly up and down the coast, picking up new players and offering to kit them out, and now in DayZ even a basic pistol is lethal in the right hands. So we'd tell them we're dropping them off at our base, which had some supplies in a crate, which they could load up on and then leave. However, the room they were dropped off into had only a crate filled with empty tin cans and water bottles inside. In order to get out, the player had to answer trivia questions, and an incorrect answer would result in us building another section of wall in the room. 3 wrong answers would result in the final section being placed inside the player, generally crushing them, as the player model would just randomly start breaking bones on the walls as they couldn't move anymore. If they answered right or did something funny, like one guy who was asked to sing a song and began singing Blink-182 songs, they were released outside to find a backpack with food and water and a suppressed M9 and a briefcase full of gold. Most people were pretty good sports about it. My friend convinced me that the past tense of mine was moaned. He also convinced our other friend that the past tense of blind was blound. I worked at Subway and had some trainees, one of whom was just dumb. Nice girl, but dumber than a bag of soup. One day, the toaster oven broke. I'm not sure why, but when she asked, I just said the flux capacitor was broken. She probably told at least 10 customers this before someone else told her. We all had a good laugh about it. Oh my god, I managed to convince a girl in 8th grade that it was impossible for water to exist in a liquid state. Yes, you heard that correctly. About 8 years ago, all Facebook events had attending, maybe, and not attending buttons, and it would show how many people fell into each category. Also at that time, people weren't very good at keeping their events private. I created a Facebook group that eventually amassed about 500 fellow trolls. Every day I'd search on Facebook for party or reception or whatever, and I'd find a private event that was accidentally made public. I'd then send the link to everyone in the group, and we'd all go to the page and click Not Attending. So some kid would be having a birthday party, they invited their entire class, and Facebook would show that 20 people would be attending, 5 people were maybes, and 500 would not be attending. I tricked the whole of Reddit into believing I was a National Geographic photographer doing an Ask Me Anything. It ended up on the front page. I convinced my wife, who never watches game shows, that contestants on Jeopardy have to pay back their debts if they have a negative balance at the end of the game. Well, that's why it's called Jeopardy, right? It's just live TV gambling. It wouldn't be very tense if you didn't have the chance of losing and weren't putting anything on the line. That's why it's such a durable and popular format compared to those other wussy game shows, where all you can do is win. When she said she was going to look it up, I said, "Sure, go ahead, you'll find confirmations, but the show likes to keep it quiet because some puritanical sorts take it amiss." She went around telling people about this for quite a while before she got gently corrected by her brother. Apparently, people didn't want to embarrass her because she was so enthusiastic about it. Yes, I'm a horrible, horrible person. When I was a kid, I successfully convinced my brother's friend that our rabbit was a British kitten. When I told him later that I was just kidding and it was actually a rabbit, he didn't believe me. I'm a submariner in the US Navy. For a dare, I convinced a college-educated girl that I'd hooked up with a few times that she could send me care packages while I was underway. It had to contain items that wouldn't perish, like beef jerky, nuts, or candy, and had to be waterproof. How would it get delivered, you ask? Well, the US Navy has a contract with most aquariums on the coast that deliver packages by whale. It's called US Whale Mail. You package your stuff, you waterproof it, label it with the ship I'm on with my name, and you take it to the aquarium. They attach a group of packages to said whale, which then swims across the world and, quote, hones in on our sonar signal. Our sonar operators hear the whale and go, "Oh, the mail's here," and we surface the ship to detach our packages and enjoy our semi-fresh beef jerky. This girl stopped emailing me a few weeks into my next deployment. I like to imagine the look on the face of the aquarium employee who possibly had to receive the package. I have no idea if she actually did it. She bought it fully while I was there, though. In short, I convinced a girl whales delivered packages to US Navy submarines. That's admittedly a pretty funny way of talking yourself out of ever sleeping with that person ever again. I hope the laugh was worth it. Honestly, I wouldn't have been able to keep a straight face if I was in the room for that lie. During a raid in World of Warcraft, I set up a keybind to only speak with one person. Over the course of 2 hours, I'd periodically whisper the word for the male reproductive organ in a gravelly tone. After saying this several times, the person finally shouts back the word at me a bunch of times, followed by, "We can all hear you." Mind you, there were 38 other people in the group who had no idea what he was talking about. It went completely dead silent, and then someone asked, "What the hell are you talking about?" We spent the next 15 minutes laughing and trying to explain to him what had occurred. This was 2 years ago, and we still tease him about it. I also trolled my oldest child, 13. One night, several hours after he was supposed to be asleep, I noticed a light under his door, so I opened it to check on him. He was sitting on his bed frantic and completely freaked out. I asked him what was going on, and he said, "I was watching adult flicks, and all of a sudden the FBI said they're watching me." I'm trying very hard to keep a straight face as he's telling me this big story about how he has to pay a fee to the FBI or they'd come arrest him. I told him to go to sleep and I'd take care of it. The next morning, I explained to him that I'd spoken to someone from the FBI and they were going to let it go since he's a minor and didn't know any better, but under very specific conditions. Conditions being probation, more or less. He was to be on his best behavior with school and home life, assist with anything that was needed, and after a month, if there was no negative report from his parents, he'd be free and clear. I generally have a very good kid, but for that month, I literally didn't have to do anything around the house. It was wonderful. Once I convinced a girl that the only reason I had good grades is that I had a degenerative disease where the arteries supplying blood to my brain would steadily shrink, and I had to take a medicine every 12 hours so that they didn't close completely. Before the tests, I'd take a double dose, flooding my brain with oxygen and making me very smart. I convinced my mum that narwhals didn't exist. I once told a girl I worked with that someone had sneaked into the building we worked in and painted "Gullible" on the ceiling in bright orange paint. She looked up and said, "There's nothing there." I also looked up and said, "They must have got maintenance to paint over it." She replied, "Oh, that makes sense. They wouldn't want to leave it there." The year was 1999. In the 5th grade, I sent an automated message from ICQ to some girl in my grade advising that everyone needed to sign off within the next 5 minutes or else their ICQ account would be deleted. The message ended advising them to pass the message along verbatim. I then sat back and watched as classmate after classmate went offline. I was so proud of myself until a crush of mine told me she has to log off or else ICQ would delete her account. I play CS:GO. Every game I pretend to be a completely brain-dead Russian, which sometimes tilts my opponents off the face of the planet. It's quite a skill. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Back when The Creatures were pretty popular in comparison to how they are now on YouTube, like in 2011-2012, they had this public Minecraft server. They had this YouTube video of being on this server, and they would use commands in the chat to have the server broadcast messages by simply putting /broadcast before their message in chat. I can't believe no one had thought of it before, or that this command was disabled for non-admins, but I used the command to broadcast some really dirty things in chat, like racism, some pretty vulgar, racy stuff, anything edgy that a 14-year-old with power would say, all while making it seem like it was the creatures doing it. Z and Dans were in at the time and panicking to keep the rampant chat calm. Soon, more and more randoms were learning that somebody was using the /broadcast command and began doing it themselves. The server was in chaos and went down for a few days. There was a guy on World of Warcraft who wouldn't stop coming on to me after he heard my voice in the guild chat, so I got my revenge by telling him about the rare mount the level 3 to 4 kobolds in Fargadeep Mine in Elwyn Forests have a small chance of dropping. He farmed that sucker for days before giving up. I ate 2 goats and a sheep and still managed to get them to pay the toll to cross my bridge. Back in the early days of AOL chat rooms, I used to chat up my 2 teenaged stepsons and get them to ask me out. They thought that I was their age and from their town. As they grew more and more excited by the prospect of hooking up, I'd start making comments about them that I couldn't possibly have known if I were truly a stranger. I used to love watching the moment they realized who I was and typed, "F you, Mom." We laugh about it now. Wait, this implies that this happened more than once. My lord, if that occurred even a single time, it would be enough to scare me off the internet forever. I once convinced my very high sister that we had been sitting in silence for the past half hour, and in fact we had been chatting. I got her to think that she had imagined the entire thing. That's what she gets for eating the last of the ice cream. Okay, a bit of backstory. Several years ago, a program came out called Comipo, which let you create comics using preset characters that you could modify, add text, and add special effects to, and so on. The thing was, it was extremely limited in what it let you do. For example, you couldn't actually create custom poses for your characters. You had to pick a pose from a list of presets, and if there wasn't a pose for what you wanted, tough luck. But the biggest kick in the butt with the program was that it launched in English with version 1.0, while the original Japanese version was on version 1.5 or whatever. The Japanese version had several updates with new, free content, bug fixes, and additional features like 3D object importing, but us English users were left out in the cold. It would be months before we'd start seeing updates, and it wasn't even until years later that we actually had the same version as the Japanese users did. Heck, there was even paid DLC costumes for the Japanese version that they wouldn't even sell to us without several months' delay. So, in short, the program sucked and the people running it sucked even harder. Well, the program was published at the time in English by Crunchyroll. It's since changed hands. Crunchyroll is the official anime streaming site, and they had a big advertising campaign to try and get people to buy Comipo. Of course, this made them very aggressive about deleting negative criticism of Comipo from their forums and the official Comipo Facebook account, which only made the dissatisfied users, myself included, more angry. And then Crunchyroll announced a contest. Entrants had to create a short 10-page comic using Comipo. All winners would receive free premium items, which we assumed was the first DLC costume pack. And the grand prize winner would also get their comic translated to Japanese and posted on the Japanese Comipo website. I knew what I had to do. I had to win this contest. Not for the prizes. Oh no, I didn't really care about the prizes at all. I just wanted to embarrass the ever-loving crap out of Comipo and Crunchyroll, and I knew just how to do it. So on to the troll. I created the most generic, pandering bullcrap comic I could possibly come up with. I studied past winners of the contest run by Crunchyroll, including previous Comipo contests, and I molded a comic out of the most blatantly pandering, generic anime moblob crap that I could possibly come up with. A comic that was, for all intents and purposes, terrible, but what would be exactly what I needed to claim victory. Of course, the comic included a healthy dose of butt-kissing to the Comipo software itself for extra points. The result of this effort was Twin Tail, an 8-page harem romance manga about two twin-tailed twins who wanted to do the deed with the generic manga protagonist. I released Twin Tail to the public via Crunchyroll's official submission forum, and then I waited. After a few weeks, the winners were decided, and what do you know, I won second place. But perhaps you're wondering, what's so funny? Where's the troll? What exactly did I do to Crunchyroll and Comipo? Well, after I received the key for my prize DLC, which didn't even work at first and then turned out to be something they were charging $15 for, that was originally released for the Japanese version for free, then I revealed my terrible secret to the world. The images in Twin Tail are GIF files, and if you wait 4 minutes on a given page, the entire page changes, revealing new dialogue that completely craps on Comipo and Crunchyroll. The angry masses of dissatisfied Comipo owners pretty much declared me a god of trolling after that. I managed to successfully get a fairly large company to declare an entry to their contest, the winner, one that secretly insulted them and their entire fanbase. Within a day, my Crunchyroll account was banned. I was IP banned from making new accounts, although I easily got around it and continued to make new accounts to mock them over the next few days, and the official Comipo Facebook account blocked me and nuked all of the posts of mine they'd ever reposted. My comic was removed from the gallery, mentions of the comic were removed from the contest thread, and anyone who mentioned the incident had their posts deleted from the Crunchyroll forums and their Facebook page. In short, successfully tricked the developers and publishers of a crappy comic-making program into declaring my entry into one of their contests the winner, while secretly insulting them via a comic that changed to say something else if you waited long enough. In retaliation, they banned me and banned all discussion of anything I'd ever posted. Haha, excellent stealth takedown. You can tell that they weren't even taking the submission seriously if they weren't even hovering on any given page for longer than 4 minutes. Way to call them out on it. I convinced my high school girlfriend that the trailblazer was an actual animal that Lewis and Clark discovered on their journey through Oregon. We were at a Portland Trailblazers basketball game for a date, and she kept commenting on how annoyed she was by the mascot. Ugh, what is that thing? Ugh, what's it doing? I said, totally straight-faced, it's a trailblazer. You never read about it? Oh yeah, well, they're extinct now. But when Lewis and Clark were traveling through what we now know as Portland, they actually happened upon it. Anthropologists believe it was something of a wolf-bear hybrid adapted to the wet climate here, and some have speculated that there may be 1 or 2 surviving that actually account for Bigfoot sightings. So she didn't buy it right away, but I kept at it pretty convincingly, and after about 5 minutes, she completely accepted it as fact. Fast forward 6 months, we're at a party with a bunch of our friends, and the Portland Trailblazers come up in conversation. She decides to share this fascinating and little-known fact. Everyone looks at me as she's sharing all of this complete nonsense, basically verbatim from what I told her, and we all just die laughing. A breakup ensued shortly after. In nursing school, I convinced a ditzy blonde girl that there was such a thing as cranial reflex, and she let me hit her in the head with a reflex hammer to test it out. Convincing everyone in a GTA 5 lobby that I was a 27-year-old Indian immigrant from New Delhi and that I was bartending for my uncle who owned a hotel in Tampa. I kept up the voice impression and story for an hour or more. The people there legitimately believed everything I said. Maybe not at first, but by the end they did. I broke the horrible news to them right before I left. They were so devastated. I told the new guy at work to top up the pressure in the forklift tires. They're solid rubber, by the way. After he spent about 30 minutes doing God knows what, he came up and said he couldn't find the right fitting for the air hose, so I told him to check the basement. There was no basement in our building. He wasted almost half of his day looking for crap that didn't exist. He also cut a piece of plywood too short and asked for help. I told him to go and ask the boss for the board stretcher. From my experience, trolls aren't very useful. Well, maybe as frontline troops. They're dumb as all hell, but they can take a beating, and you really don't care when they die. Not that I'd care anyway, but bygones are bygones. I've got one pointy tooth, it's my canine, and I had a girl convinced for over an hour that I was half vampire. I'm originally from a place called Saskatchewan. It's not really hard to pronounce, it's just like it's spelled, but if you haven't heard it a lot, it can be intimidating to try and read out loud. I briefly moved to Portland, Oregon, and whenever anyone would try to say it, usually correct or very close, I'd always say, "So close, just a little bit off." And they'd try again with a random inflection. I had one woman going every week or so for the entire year and a half that we both lived there. One time I broke into the bathroom of this really crazy school. I was having a good time until some punk with round glasses and his ginger sidekick shoved a wand into my nose and I passed out from the pain. 3 out of 10 wouldn't recommend. I'm in the dumb math class, so I'll just name a few I've managed to pull off this month. The first one was convincing literally over half the class that there were 14 original colonies, not 30. This was especially good as we'd been studying American history and learning about the start of the US. On Tuesday, December 13th, my teacher asked for the date and everyone obviously said, the 13th. So I gasped and said, "It's Friday the 13th!" A girl in front of me screamed, "Oh my god, really?" And after a good 30 seconds, someone said something along the lines of, "It's Tuesday." To which the girl turned around and said, "Don't play me like that." I think I've convinced a couple of family members that potatoes are responsible for 1% of the deaths in the US. What's the dumbest reason you've been fired? On Thursday, my boss has her daughter's dance recital that she had been planning for months. 3 days prior, I was asked to be a date to a wedding. I said yes and asked my boss, who immediately said no. We ended up getting coverage, and the wedding and the recital went off without a hitch. However, Thursday and Friday night, I'd started on some new meds for my incredibly serious illness beginning with a C, and they made me incredibly drowsy. So much so to the point that I overslept by 2 hours. On Friday, I started calling my boss, I have call logs, and as soon as she hears it's me, she hangs up on me. This happened 6 times before I make it to work, alternating between her cell and the store telephone. As soon as I get there, I try to plead my case and clock in. She immediately tells me to clock out as I'm a no clock, no show. I don't understand how this is possible, especially given the call logs and the fact that I'm seen on the security footage, and I clocked in anyway. I tried to get her to sit down in the office to talk calmly, and she, a very devout Christian woman who rarely curses, screamed at the top of her lungs to get the frick out of her office. At this point, I'm very confused. I have no idea why she'd be so angry at me. And then I find out. The day of the wedding, my boss let me go home early and get ready. I made a post on Facebook saying, "Out of work, time to get ready." Thank God she let me out of work early for once, considering all the times I covered for her. I'm not friends with her on Facebook, and I find out the one customer I'm friends with on Facebook showed her the message while she bragged about the recital. F that noise. I know what she's trying to do. She's trying to get me another no call, no show. So I show up right on time, walk in the building to be seen on all the security cameras, clock in, and then get escorted out. Beat the system as best as I could. And tonight I spent time printing out some 40-odd emails where I covered shifts for her and did things for her that she said I didn't. I also printed out all the call logs, and I'm going to have my doctor fax first thing tomorrow for the 2 days I overslept due to my new cancer meds. 1 copy for her, 1 copy postmarked for employee organizational development. I got a phone call from my boss this morning, being told I'm getting 2 days off, paid, and we'll reconvene come Wednesday. I'm assuming they're attempting to find a store to transfer me to very far away to give me the option to relocate or quit, therefore getting out of paying my unemployment. In short, overslept, went to a wedding, made a Facebook post, employer saw it. I'm going to get fired as a result since she doesn't have to have a reason. Yay, unemployment. Okay, update. And I'm fired. HR was waiting for me the second I walked in the door. I tried to plead my case, but they just weren't having it. It's definitely one of the worst days of my life right now, as reality is starting to set in. I mean, of course they had that ambush set up the moment you came in. Sorry that happened to you, dear author. It sounds like a raw deal. You probably shouldn't have made that post. That's a learning moment right there. I hope you've moved on to better things and that the wedding was an absolute rager to somewhat compensate for what happened to you. I worked midnights at a steel mill as a very young adult for 2 years. I had access to the entire network to do some of my work, even though I was just a general laborer. Union shop. Long story short, someone had left their login and password in a file on the public directory. I, being the good little worker, pointed it out to my direct supervisor. From there, I thought it was over. Turns out, he took this account that belonged to a wonderful older woman that also happened to have unrestricted access and logged into very adult websites at work. He was busted. What does he do? He points the finger at me and says I'm the one that gave him the password and login. Blam. Fired for, quote, hacking a corporate network. I got fired for turning in my 2-week notice. WorldCom sucked anyway. I got fired for turning in and working my notice and then not going back to work. We regret to inform you that due to your prolonged absence, we can no longer wish for you to work here. I quit 2 months ago. I worked in this costume shop, and my boss, who was obviously very unhappy with her life, had built this place up in her head and acted like we were some designer store on Rodeo Drive. In my free time, I wrote for a couple of local blogs and magazines and went to events, Fashion Week, and things like that. I always got invites to these events, and she never did, and she'd always say it was because she's too important for them, so people were too intimidated to invite her. When I'd work the day after an event, she'd pick on me the entire day and say the event was probably lame and all the people there had to be tacky. She even got in my face and called me a working girl one day because a guy from one of the events recognized me and said hello while I was working. Finally, after I got an amazing opportunity and got to cover Fashion Week and go for free and everything, I went into work and she told me I was fired. I'd betrayed her. Plus side is, I immediately got offered a job at an actual clothing store with benefits and commission. No more selling pimp and hot dog costumes. I saw a dishwasher at the old restaurant I worked at get fired because one of the cooks at the time got mad and threw a plate across the kitchen. The plate shattered, and seconds after, the owner walked in and without any further inquiry fired the person responsible for washing the dishes. I can beat this. My boyfriend worked in a restaurant where a waitress got fired after a dishwasher threw a plate across the kitchen at her face and cut her badly enough that she needed stitches. Management claimed they never saw the dishwasher throw the plate, and so they fixed the squeaky wheel and fired the waitress. I was scheduled to work on a Friday and got diagnosed with mono on a Monday. I don't know if you've ever had mono, but it knocks you on your butt pretty hard. I showed my employer my note on Monday and was promptly picked up by my mother and brought home to get taken care of properly. I got a text from my boss on Friday saying that I needed to come in or I was fired. When I reminded him I had mono, he said that my job was to sit at a desk and take to-go orders. I also check to-go orders, which means I have direct contact with people's food. Dumbest crap ever. 8-hour shift by myself most days. Management sent me to deposit money into the bank when we were overflowing with cash. I wrote schedules when the manager needed me to. I was getting bonuses weekly from the home office because of my sales and customer service. I never cheated, I never stole, I loved that job. I envisioned myself working there until after I graduated college. Sure, I wasn't being paid crap, but they were flexible with my school hours, and that's all I really wanted at the time. They closed a store a city over, which my boss's wife happened to manage due to poor sales. They decided to promote my boss to regional and move her over to my store and have her manage it. She's been with the company 15 years, so it's cool. Whatever. I've met her a couple of times. Within a day of her being there, she starts telling me everything I'm doing is wrong. Within 2 days, I'm being written up for the first time ever in 4 years because I clocked in 5 minutes before my shift was supposed to start. My previous manager always had me clock in as soon as I came in so I could get to work on shipment and phone orders. Day 3 rolls around, the new manager has a girl from her former store come in and fill out an application and wants me to show her the ropes of how things work here. Day 4, the old boss, who's now regional manager, catches me before I walk in. Can't look me in the face at all during the conversation. Reason for termination? Poor sales. I guess I got it lucky. They fired me in November. They fired the assistant manager who'd been there 8 years right before Christmas. I felt worse for her. She had kids. But yeah, I don't hold a grudge or anything. I needed it for a dose of reality. Up until that point, I thought a loyal employee meant a loyal employer. Yep, I've been relatively lucky with bosses who at least had something resembling a sense of decency towards their employees, but this is far from an uncommon experience for people who make their work their life. The Michael Scotts of the world will throw the Dwights under the buses at the drop of a hat. I was fired from an ice cream shop for not being gay. It turned out the manager was looking to replace the young girl who'd been working there before me and who she'd been having a lesbian relationship with. Apparently, my general manager lost out on his Christmas bonus because too much money had gone missing on his watch, so he was super angry. So he comes in one night, he wasn't working, and asks to see this tiny little 18-year-old kid who'd just been promoted like 2 weeks prior outside. I was 21 at the time, and the other manager was maybe 5'5" and 120 pounds soaking wet. About 20 minutes later, the GM comes back in, rubbing his knuckles, and looks me in the eye and says, "Hey Paul, I'm going to need you to clean up some blood." So in shock, I go outside and sure enough there's blood all over the back smoking and garbage area. I start to clean it up while he stands and watches me while telling the sap story of his life and money woes and how much this kid deserved it. He then goes home and the rest of the staff and I are just kind of standing there shocked that this just happened. About an hour later, the 18-year-old manager comes back and his face is barely recognizable. I told him to go to the hospital, but he refused for whatever reason, and he said he called the cops and asked me to back up his story, which I told him I would. So another half hour or so passes, and the cops show up at Taco Bell, and I give them a statement that's completely truthful. Chatted with the cops for a while, give them some free tacos, and then head home for the night. Next day, I come into work, and the GM asks to see me outside. Now, I'm 6 foot tall and 275 pounds and grew up in a rougher neighborhood, so I'm not some easy target, and at that point I was almost eager for him to hit me so I can teach him a lesson. He got in my face and it seemed like he was weighing up his options, but he decided against it and just asked me if I talked to the cops, to which I replied yes, and I'm surprised he hadn't been arrested already. He then says, "Finish out your shift and don't bother coming back, you're fired." So I said, "Oh hell no, if you're going to fire me, you have to have the stones to do it in front of everyone." So I walk back inside, ask all of the staff that were there to gather around, and that the GM has something he'd like to say. So put on the spot, he fires me then and there, and I go home to call the labor board to see how badly I can sue their butts for wrongful termination. Turns out I can't. I hadn't worked there long enough and didn't make enough money, which really ticked me off. I hated that job anyway, and I got another one pretty quickly, so it wasn't a huge deal, but it still blows my mind, and people rarely believe me when I tell the story. In short, I was fired from Taco Bell where I was manager because my general manager beat the crap out of one of the others for stealing from the register. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I worked at a gas station in Chicago making about $700 a week. I had 1 day off a month and I had to come in to do inventory on that day. I didn't mind all the hours because the pay was good. Anyways, I came down with an infection near my eye and went to the ER. The doctor told me I had to be admitted. I said I couldn't do that because I had to work. He told me best case scenario I'd lose my eye, but that more likely the infection would go to my brain and I'd die. So I called work and let them know I was in the hospital. Spent 4 days there hooked up to an IV that gave me 24 hours of antibiotics a day. Finally got out and went to work and got fired because of it. He told me it was because he needed someone for that shift and he really couldn't let them go after just hiring them. And to top it off, he fought my unemployment claim. The company was too small to sue them over it. The guy only owned 2 gas stations. To sue under the FMLA, the employer has to have more than 50 employees. He had a total of 7. I spoke with 3 different lawyers and they all said the same thing. They were all very disappointed about that. I think they wanted to sue him more than I did. So I understand this is only marginally relevant, but it definitely ranks among the dumbest firings of all time. It turns out the entire crew of the Titanic was fired effective the morning of the 15th of April 1912. Yep, that's right, before the ship even entirely sank, everyone was fired. And get this, it was for abandoning ship and disembarking on the high seas. And by the way, this was all employees, even the dead ones. When the few that survived made it to shore, they had nothing. No money, no employer, no support, nada. Of course, the whole thing was a maneuver by the White Star Line to avoid paying out to families the wages and pensions and insurance claims that would be generated. Luckily, subsequent lawsuits reversed a lot of this. If you want an example of asinine employer jerkery, well, it's hard to beat that. I lost my phone the night of my college's senior formal. That night, I got a call from my boss announcing an emergency meeting the following morning, which obviously I missed, and I was immediately fired along with 2 of my colleagues. So stupid. The meeting was to review 5 new menu items. I got fired from my university sports center job as a pool lifeguard for posting on Facebook that I found substances in a toilet there. The next day I had a phone call asking me to remove said status, and shortly afterwards an email to inform me that my employment had been terminated on grounds of besmirching the university's good name. No joke, HR actually used the word besmirching. I would have been impressed if I wasn't so furious. The university is in the UK, if anyone was wondering. Well, I hope that you went full fire and fury on your old workplace and published a laundry list of every other crappy thing that you saw go on there. You probably didn't, given that you wanted to find another job, but they deserved it. Although most of us know that there's a reasonable risk of firing if we post something like that. I was once fired from a radio news director job for being, quote, a loose cannon. I never know what you're gonna do next. This was in reference to news stories and when they aired. I guess I should have shown him my magic calendar that told me when and where news would happen. I was fired 2 years into a position that I was really great at for not wearing any makeup and answering the phone on 2 rings, not 1 ring. I was fired by the store manager who was there for 1 week. The owner was furious at him, but I refused to go back. I was fired for refusing to help my boss forge receipts for his tax audit. I had the best college job in the world, watching the library computer labs on campus. I had about 4 shifts of varying length every week, and I'd always show up on time. Very, very rarely had someone cover, and I would pick up a shift every other week or so. There was rather a large automated system, so my boss knew I was among the more reliable lab attendants, which he even admitted after firing me. Anyway, there is 1 meeting before the start of each semester, and if you didn't show up for the meeting, you're fired. End of story. There was nothing important at the meeting. If you sent an email letting him know you weren't back in school yet, he wouldn't fire you. When you consider the meeting would last about 15 minutes and there was really nothing to cover, it's all very arbitrary. He just had to fire a few people a year to make his job look important. I sent an email saying I wouldn't be on campus yet, but he didn't receive it. He sent me an email at the start of semester letting me know I was fired, which is kind of like breaking up with someone via Twitter. I replied asking to meet him in person, which he pretty much never did with any of us, except for that 1 meeting, and after going back and forth I was finally able to meet him and I showed him the email I sent. He admitted it was very hard to fire me as I was a very reliable lab attendant and picked up shifts no one wanted. He'd still probably have to fire me using the excuse, well, what else do I say to the other 2 people I fired for the same reasons? What if they come up with an email too? I asked if I was in fact still fired and he said, I'll have to think about it. I requested very clearly that at the very least he call me or have me come by his office to tell me I was fired. 3 days later, he sent me another email saying I was still fired. Mainly, I was angry that I was fired by email, and this guy, who was such a lazy, useless boss that he contacted me all of 0 times the year I worked in the labs, didn't even have the stones to fire me in person. I was subbing for an 8th grade history teacher once. He had about 4 periods of the same course, and all I needed to do was play a PowerPoint, which included a video, and read the slides aloud to the students. Prior to the last class of the day, one of the students messed around with the computer, and the PowerPoint was no longer usable, or I couldn't find it. I don't remember, I just know I was crap out of luck at that point. Luckily, the teacher had printed out the PowerPoint slides for me, and I'd remembered almost everything that was on the video. I'm also a good teacher, and I'm pretty good with improv. I started delivering the information from memory and was pretty entertaining, but I got a bit carried away with myself when I said, and then the king said, let's get those French bastards, and war began, or something to that effect. The important thing is that I swore. The next day, the principal called me into his office and said some students reported me for saying the B word. I knew I'd made a mistake, but I hadn't used the term directed at students, and never mind the fact that I improvised the lesson from memory and on the spot. Never mind the fact that the students were entertained and spent the whole of the lesson giving me their undivided attention and asking excellent follow-up questions, a sign of engaged learning. I was removed permanently as a sub for that school because of this one incident. I was and still am a very talented substitute, but I get into occasional trouble because students refuse to speak to me if they have an issue and instead choose to report me out of context to their principal. I truly hate my job because of the terrible imbalance of power both students and teachers hold over subs. I always feel like I'm about to lose my job, no matter if I'm a very active, great sub or if I'm a lazy, passive sub. There is no victory. My first aircraft maintenance job out of college. I was working for a guy running a small shop at a rural airport. He was quite a character. A real hardliner that had the highest expectations of me and the other employee and would get angry if we took too long, in his opinion, to do something. For example, we got an aeroplane in for our 100-hour inspection that was obviously long overdue and crap was completely neglected on the previous one. The spark plugs were so caked with lead that it took me an hour to clean them out. He got mad that it took longer than the typical half hour and wouldn't hear any of my excuses. He'd get mad at me for taking too long to cut open an air filter in spite of his shop being a complete mess and it taking me 10 minutes to find the filter cutter. Even he didn't know where it was. Despite these factors, he rarely did any work himself and set a bad example for us or downright messed it up. But he sat in the office allowing me, a completely green apprentice, and his other employee, a fourth-year apprentice, to work unsupervised, and would take hour-long coffee breaks. If the other employee or I would get up to head back to work before he was done with his coffee, he'd tell us to sit and relax. Anyway, when my 3-month probationary period was ending, he called me into his office and started grilling me about random aircraft knowledge. Again, since I was fresh out of school and that was my first job, I had very little practical knowledge, and looking back now, half the crap he was asking was stuff even a 2 to 3 year journeyman would be unlikely to know. So of course, I didn't know the answers to a lot of the questions. He got angry, as usual, and started ranting about the terrible quality of graduates the college was turning out, and how he was going to phone them and complain, and then he sent me back to work saying he had to think long and hard about whether he wanted to keep me on. I thought about it for the rest of the day and was pretty sure he was going to fire me, so the next morning I showed up, and as soon as he arrived I told him I was quitting, packed up my tools and left. I got a better job a week later at a reputable company that did things by the book, working supervised under a journeyman, and received absolutely glowing performance reviews and a good reference when I left for another job. In short, had a sketchy first job, and I quit before the boss fired me. What happened when you ignored the "don't try this at home" warning? When I was about 10, I folded myself into the sleeper sofa with the help of my cousin. Here's why this is an incredibly bad idea. You can't breathe. You can't move. You can shout for help, but your cries for it will travel at the best 5 feet because your mouth is smothered by a mattress. The spring mechanism, in combination with your weight, will make it nearly impossible for someone to pull the mattress back out unless they're very strong or you're very light. My cousin had to run upstairs to get a grown-up to flip the sofa on its side so I could roll out. If I did this stunt while I was by myself, I probably would have suffocated very quickly. Do you remember lawn darts? My group of friends made our own rules. 2 teams, one in the front yard, one in the back. 1 member of each team on the side lawn from where you could see both teams at the same time. We only had 1 dart, we'd lost the others in a game of woods darts. The goal was to rifle that one fricking dart over the house and make a member of the other team, rightfully afraid for their life, move out of the way of said dart, and 1 point if you made them move. -1 point if it landed within arm's reach and they didn't move. The game lasted until someone's parents came home and were horrified when they saw what we were doing. The 80s were a simpler, bloodier time. Me and my friend decided to golf off of each other when we were about 14. The initial idea was to drive off the tea that was in our mouth, but then common sense kicked in and we decided against it. But still wanting to go through with something, we decided to do it with our butt cheeks. Ugh. I went first as the hitter, and it went way better than I expected. I lined that crap up and drove it as far as I could, while still caring for my friend's buttocks' safety. Not a scratch on him, so I was ready to be hit off. I laid down on my stomach and put the tee in place, and my friend lined his shot up and goes all in for his swing. He follows through and puts the driver right into my butt cheeks, and at that moment it felt like everything I once knew was wrong, and my butt was freaking hurting like heck, but that's besides the point. Listen to the advisory, kids. Wait, you say that there's an advisory, but never in my life have I seen a warning or had an instructor tell me not to do this. You know what did tell me not to do this? My goddamn common sense. Dry ice and a little bit of water in a plastic bottle. Bad idea. The bottle expanded but didn't explode. We basically had an armed bomb laying on a soccer field next to a playground. We had to make it explode somehow, so my dad took a long stick and hit it a couple of times. The bottle finally exploded and my dad heard ringing in his ears for about a year. We didn't find any traces of the bottle. My brother and I got the bright idea to see what happens if you put one of those CO2 cartridges used for BB weapons into a fireplace. Long story short, the resulting explosion filled most of the main floor of the house with flying chunks of burning wood. My mum was not amused. Split a cucumber by throwing knives at it. My friends and I were putting stuff in the microwave. Apparently, eggs not only explode, but they're hot as fricking napalm. I decided to make my own fireworks. Apparently, potassium nitrate, or stump remover, and sugar mixed together make for a pretty good smoke bomb. The way you make it is you mix the two ingredients together and put it in a pan over a small flame. The heat melts the two together into a chocolatey brown goo. If you put that goo into a cardboard toilet paper roll and stick a wick in there, you have a pretty big smoke bomb. The first time I did it, we had a lot of fun smoking out an entire park. Then I decided we needed to go bigger. This is America after all. So I doubled the ingredients and started cooking it on my stove. Stupid me forgot that the video said medium to low heat and I had the burner on high. Halfway through cooking it, the heat caught the mixture on fire and started going crazy. I got my brother out of the house and dumped water on the mixture. For the next 2 hours, you couldn't go into my house because the smoke was so thick you couldn't see more than 2 feet in front of you. My parents were furious at first because the ceiling was burned, the countertops charred, and the floor was even melted a bit. Then once they got the insurance money, their attitude changed completely. The insurance covered the ceiling, all of our cabinets, and a couple of the countertops that were burned. The stove was melted and even the dishwasher caught some damage. We're very thrifty and the do-it-yourself kind of people. We bought all of our appliances secondhand, even the cabinets. And with the money we saved, we bought the raw material for the marble countertops and put it in ourselves. We also tiled the floor ourselves. We still had some money left over, so we bought a nice granite table at the flea market. People don't realize what you can accomplish by learning to do things on your own and going to flea markets and Craigslist. So we now have a brand new kitchen that's way nicer than our last one. In short, made bootleg fireworks, destroyed my kitchen, and now we eat off marble and granite. I had the great idea to fire some fireworks inside my house. You can try it at home, but I wouldn't recommend it. It was fun though. I was told not to try making small firecrackers at home. I still have all 9 of my fingers and I had fun too. Probably every wrestling move on my brothers in 2000 and 2001. Sometimes it went wrong and hurting them, like powerbombing them on the wooden edge of the bed. My brother and I made thermite in high school and melted a GameCube, among other things, with it. I feel like Adam Savage and Jamie Heineman told us not to try that at home at least once. My friends and I recently used our pool skimmer to have a pole vaulting tournament as seen on a nationwide commercial. The fact that the idea came from an insurance commercial should have been enough to deter us. We ended up vaulting all the way to the far end of the pool and I smashed my feet into the wall. Besides 2 sprained ankles, everyone else was fine. The pool skimmer worked really well as a vaulting pole. When I was about 10, I jumped off my 15-foot deck with an umbrella. Yeah, don't try that. I tried to rebuild the paper crossbow from Mythbusters along with many other things from that show. Royal Rumble in the back garden. 4-on-4. I fly-kicked my cousin into the wall, cracked his head open, goes to the hospital and gets stitches. A few years later, he tried pushing me into the pool. I pulled him in with me and his chin caught the edge. More stitches. We don't talk much these days. I put orange juice in a soda stream and tried to carbonate it. It had a warning specifically saying not to do that. I read said warning. I'm usually not the kind of person who ignores warnings, but this didn't seem like it would be an issue. I thought it was because the carbonator tube would get sticky and clog, but I thought that I could clean it. Nope, that's not why. It's because it fricking explodes. I was finding sticky spots for months. An 8-year-old me, unsupervised, heard the term electromagnet on TV. Smart as I was, I assumed the rest and proceeded to take a magnet, tape 2 wires to it, and stick the ends in a socket while holding said contraption in my hands. 220 volts AC passing through the human body is definitely a bit more than a mild inconvenience. Received a jolt that I remember clearly to this day. Burned the socket board, tripped the mains, and learned a lesson for life. I'm glad that I wasn't eliminated from the gene pool that day. When I was about 10 or 11, my friends and I used to imitate Jackass. But our show was called Dumb Idiots. I was the biggest one out of all of us, so I took the brunt of the damage. One of the dumbest things we did was have me stand on an office chair and another of my friends drop-kick it. I ended up falling face first onto the floor. I wasn't too injured, but it hurt. I'm fairly certain that every group of idiot teen boys has tried to be Jackass at some point. I know mine did. We got lucky, and the footage was lame anyway. The warning at the beginning of that show was seen and ignored by us. Kids are just dumb. I hit a basketball-sized hornet's nest with a baseball bat. Much stinging, much pain. So you know those parkour videos? I tried doing some of that when I was 12. I jumped from a bench onto a small wall and landed on my belly. Ugh, that was painful. I couldn't breathe and my thighs hit the edge, so I couldn't walk either. But I looked cool, right? I was staying at my friend Ben's house, who was a bit of a latchkey kid. The movie Daredevil had just come out and I was maybe 12. It was 2 in the morning and we were busy skating around the front of the house, annoying the frick out of his neighbors. I got the awesome idea that we should light the skate rail we had on fire, just like in Daredevil. So I grabbed a can of gasoline that was sitting in his garage and proceeded to coat the rail with it. After coating the rail with gasoline, I lit the gas and it was a little bit lackluster. I figured, let's just throw some more gas on that thing. So I did. The gas trickling out of the can caught fire and the can exploded in my hand. Luckily, my reflexes saved my butt and I let go of the can just as the flame hit. Ben's lawn was completely aflame. I just walked inside and didn't do anything about it because I didn't want to get into trouble. In short, tried to be Ben Affleck, lit my friend's lawn on fire. I never ignored the "don't try this at home," but I did frequently visit sites where I had to confirm I was 18 plus all throughout my teens. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I cringe whenever I remember this. When I was 12 or 13, the movie Jackass was really popular with my friends, and we'd watch it almost daily. We thought they were so cool and funny for doing stupid stuff for the sake of a laugh. Well, we'd tried to recreate some of the stupid gigs they performed. One day, while my mum took my friends and me to the grocery store, my friends convinced me to pull a prank on some poor guy shopping. I grabbed a huge pack of toilet paper, walked right up behind this dude and threw the TP at his back. He turned around and screamed at me, a little nerdy 12-year-old girl in glasses, and walked away. I've never been more mortified, and since then, from that day on, I decided Jackass was really, really dumb and immature. I tried to make a potato launcher out of PVC pipe one summer day. The guy on the YouTube video said not to try it at home without adult supervision, but of course, at the ripe age of 15, I wasn't going to let that stop me. So I went to the garage and gathered up all of the required materials. My parents probably wouldn't notice a bunch of PVC and their sack of potatoes missing anyways, and proceeded to build my masterpiece. I figured that just having it shoot straight would be kinda lame, so I decided to pseudo-mod it by cutting a slit into the edge of the PVC cap to act as a sort of scope. The thing is, I forgot to shave off the ends that were stuck on the barrel and proceeded to fire off my first round. I ended up getting potato bits everywhere in my garage and almost cut my arm open on a flying piece of PVC. Remember, kids, do not do this at home is a valid warning. I launched bottle rockets out of my buddy's ear gauges. Saw the warning saying not to try it at home, so I went to my neighbor's house and did it there instead. My brother and I would play WWE with some of our friends as kids, and my brother would never let anyone win, so one day he came after me when I had one of the championships. I forgot to say that he had the other 2 belts. So he and I had a match, and at one point I decided to go for a powerbomb. I couldn't lift him up all the way and dropped him on the air conditioner accidentally. He was on the ground, lying in the fetal position in a puddle of water, so I went for the pin, and the jerk put his arm up. I remember the kids that were doing commentary screaming out of shock. I waited for him to get up and went for a super kick, and I missed, and he pushed me into the bottom left corner of the window, and that piece broke and I got a cut on my forehead. I wanted to cry so bad, but he tackled me into the wall, put me on the bed, and did a rock bottom from the bed onto the floor. He pushed me off the goddamn bed. He pinned me and won my damn cardboard belt. He held all titles in our little wrestling group at the time, and I still hate him for it. I drank antifreeze on purpose. It's both spicy and sweet at the same time. Not in a Chinese food kind of way, in a chemical reaction on your tongue kind of way. It's delicious, and if you taste it, you'll understand why animals and children will drink it. Not recommended. You know, because of the horrible poisoning effect. So I wore a baseball hat a little too much, and I had this huge clogged foreskin kind of thing on my forehead. It looked like a pencil eraser smack dab in the middle of my forehead. I had it for 2 months with no change. I researched online and found out that with a bottle of Jack Daniels and a few friends, I could use wart freeze-off and might have some luck getting it off. I told my doctor and she laughed in my face. She said, "Good luck with that, let me know how it works out." I took that as a challenge, and just to make sure, I verified there was no major facial nerves that I might accidentally freeze. In the end, it did work better than I thought. I essentially killed all of the cell tissue and it fell off and healed up fine. 10 out of 10 would do it again. To be honest, the narrator was absolutely holding out for one of these that actually went perfectly fine. You should still listen to warnings and consult professionals, audience. But yeah, every once in a while, one of us idiots who tries something dumb will walk away unscathed. I sabered a bottle of champagne and it was pretty epic. I was around 3 or 4 and my sister was about 2, and after watching Barbie Swan Lake before bed, we decided to imitate the scene where Odette jumps the waterfall in the bedroom we shared. Me being the eldest, naturally I went first, jumping from our windowsill onto our bedroom floor. I landed it and felt like a boss, and then came my baby sister's turn. She broke her leg trying to copy me. Needless to say, she can't remember much, although myself and my parents have fond memories of her running around the garden with a neon pink cast. She now claims she got her revenge by pushing me off my scooter when I was 8 and she was 6, and I broke both bones in my arm that time. Unfortunately, I can remember that a lot more and spent a holiday abroad in a bright orange cast. I arrived at a party maybe 15 minutes after they put on Beer Fest in the background. This was right after that came out on DVD. I said I'll try to drink with them. People told me, "Don't do that, they literally had a warning saying not to do exactly that." Punched a hole in the wall, woke up my mother from spewing so loud and crapping my pants. Not sure if there's ever been a "don't try this at home" warning for this particular thing, but it certainly qualifies as something stupid. Now, to set the scene, a bunch of mates and I go camping every year. It's a pretty awesome weekend and we get up to all sorts of stuff. Well, this year, in our drunken wisdom, we decided to shake the hell out of a can of beer, bury it, and then build the fire pit on top. Don't ask me why, we're idiots. So, cut to a few hours later, we've all completely forgotten about our little time bomb ticking away and are all sat around having a good time when the mother of all explosions takes place. We've had the campfire down to a couple of coals for cooking, thankfully, so when the can went off, it only launched dirt, ash, and coal around us, as opposed to what would have happened had we built it up roaring like usual. For about 10 seconds afterwards, it felt like a lot longer, I'm sitting on my butt, dazed and confused, looking around, ears ringing as ash and dust gently tumbles down into the campsite. It felt like a scene out of a war movie. No one was injured and we all have a pretty awesome story to tell now. Still wouldn't recommend anyone tries it at home, though someone most likely will. I ate toilet paper after watching Strange Addictions because she made it look so delicious. My friend had access to dry ice our sophomore year of college from his research gig. We filled water bottles with dry ice and some water and kept them, throwing them and watching them blow up in mounds of Buffalo, New York snow. One of them didn't detonate per se, so I decided to defuse it, instead of detonating as some stranger walks by, and it went off in my hand. Miraculously, nothing more than a few scrapes on my hand and 30 minutes of being deaf in my right ear. I almost made a friend go to the ER while playing WWE. When I was around 11, I started asking my parents and all the other adults I knew if I could have their old electronics to disassemble for fun. All of them thought this was the typical kid disassembles and then reassembles a printer kind of thing that my dad had already done with me several times. Nope, I had blueprints. Very poorly drawn because I was 11. They were for a number of devices I wanted to build. I'd read up on Wikipedia and my dad's old EE textbooks to figure out what materials I needed to build a cutting laser, a microwave flamethrower, an arc welder, and a few other things I've forgotten over the years. As the broken electronics filtered in, computers from the early 90s, defunct DVD players, among others, I slowly acquired all the parts I needed. My mother figured out what I was up to and stopped me shortly before I was about to extract the capacitor from the broken microwave. She was afraid of how much charge the capacitor would store, and it turned out, given my poor grounding safety practices, I likely would have fried myself. Turns out my dad's old textbooks hadn't explained the potential health ramifications for electricity, and for all the math I could do, I was still an idiot. The other, less dangerous stuff would have still been awesome, but I was banned from messing with electronics until I left for college a couple of years later. I have a ton of stories. I wanted to be a stuntman growing up, and my all-time idol was Evel Knievel. Before I knew Parlor existed, I was into jumping from roof to roof at my grandma's house. The houses weren't too far apart. One day I was climbing up to my training area, which used the gate and the side of the wall, and then I slipped and fell and fractured my tailbone. I also received one of those rockets that you launch and it comes down on its little parachute, and my friends and I wondered what would happen if one of us got shot by it. So we took turns shooting at it and each other using a pipe to aim it in our general direction. We were wearing our four-wheeling helmets and safety goggles for safety, and my friend got hit square in the head and survived our amazing stunt. We also tried building an underground base using an old camper shell as a roof, and charged kids money to jump their bikes and whatever over our area of operations if we were in it. I think that was the stupidest thing we really did. Some kid took his dad's four-wheeler and tried to jump over us while we were laying down in it, and it almost crushed us. We were about 9 to 12 years old, and the neighborhood kids would make us feel like rock stars when we rolled on by in our Huffies. Anything they did on gladiators, or at least the best approximation a bunch of 8-year-old kids can construct between themselves. Used a crap ton of tannerite on a giant propane tank that apparently had some propane left in it. I have roughly 40% hearing in my left ear and 60% in my right, and degrading because of this. My idiot cousin shot it before I was in the trench and had my hearing protection on. I got thrown into the hole and couldn't hear for days because of the shockwave. His brother got thrown into the hole and was in a medically induced coma for a few days to try to stop brain damage. He's okay, but not 100% anymore. My idiot cousin lost several teeth when I knocked him out a week later in retaliation. He then lost some more when his brother beat the crap out of him too. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.